They say the moment before you die, your whole life flashes before your eyes. Mine didn't. Just one memory. Her face, smiling at someone else. I died at 26. Nothing heroic about it. No dragon, no villain monologue, no dramatic last-second save by anyone. Just a rooftop, a shove, and the ground coming up way too fast. The guy who pushed me, my so-called best friend Kale, the girl who stood there watching, Sarah, the one I genuinely would have died for anyway. Funny how that works out. I remember the exact moment my back hit the edge of the railing. Kale's hand on my chest, that look in his eyes, cold, practiced, like he'd been planning this for a long time. Maybe he had. I was too busy being in love to notice. I remember thinking, I should be angry right now, but I wasn't. I was just tired. 19 floors, plenty of time to think on the way down. I thought about the small apartment I'd saved up for 3 years to afford. I thought about the job I hated but kept because Sarah said it was stable. I thought about every decision I'd made that led me to this rooftop. Every single one of them had her at the center. What a waste, I thought. And then the ground introduced itself to me at high speed. The end. Roll credits. Thanks for playing. Except it wasn't the end. That was the first thing that surprised me. I expected darkness, silence, nothingness. Instead, I got a waiting room. I'm being serious. An actual waiting room. White walls, plastic chairs, a little number dispenser by the door. The kind you find at a government office or a really depressing deli. I pulled a ticket. Number 7,749, 203. The display above the desk read, now serving 7,749, 190. I sat down, looked around. There were others waiting. All of them looked just as confused as I felt. An old man in a hospital gown, a teenage girl with a skateboard, a guy in a suit still holding his briefcase. We didn't talk. What would you even say? Hey, how'd you die? Oh, cool, me too. Wild Tuesday. So I waited. The numbers ticked up slowly. At some point, a woman sat next to me. Dark coat, dark eyes. She didn't take a number, she just sat there and looked at me. I looked back. You're not waiting for anything, are you? She tilted her head. No. I turned away. Filed that away for later. Eventually my number was called. I walked up to the desk. A tired-looking man in a gray suit looked up at me. He had the face of someone who'd been doing paperwork for 1,000 years. Name? He asked. Ash, I said. Asher Vane. He typed something, frowned, typed again, frowned harder. He said. I don't like it when people at official desks say, Problem? I asked. Your file, he said, squinting at the screen. It's flagged. Flagged how? Premature termination, external cause, unauthorized. He said it the way you'd say your package was delivered to the wrong address. Sir, your death was misrouted. Very sorry for the inconvenience. I blinked. You mean I wasn't supposed to die yet? Correct. The termination of your life was not scheduled. So what happens now? He typed something, printed something, stamped something. You go back, he said. Back, as in back to life. Correct. I stared at him. Just like that? Just like that? And Kale? The guy who pushed me? He glanced at the screen. Not within the scope of my department? Of course it wasn't. Can I at least get something? I asked. For the trouble? He looked at me over his glasses. Mr. Vane, you are being granted a second life. Right, but I died. Unfairly, painfully, 19 floors. He stared at me. I stared back. He sighed, opened a drawer, pulled out a small card and slid it across. I picked it up. It shimmered faintly, like it couldn't decide what color it was. System initialization pending. Soulbound ability unlocked. What's this? I asked. A clerical error in your favor, he said. Don't push it. Then the white walls folded in and everything went black again. I woke up gasping on the floor of my apartment. Same cracked ceiling, same coffee mug I'd left on the counter. I lay there for a full minute just breathing. Then I sat up, looked at my hands, and said out loud to nobody, Okay, round 2. The card from the waiting room was gone, but I could feel something in my chest like a second heartbeat. Quiet, steady, waiting. I reached for it with my mind, the way you reach for a word you can't quite remember, and just like that, a screen appeared in front of my eyes. Not a phone screen, not a TV screen. A screen that existed only for me, or visible only to me, generated by whatever had just been activated inside my chest. I read it twice, then a third time. Soul Dominion. That sounded either very cool or very cursed, probably both. I tapped the ability description with my mind. I sat back. Let that sink in. I could control souls, dead ones, souls that hadn't moved on yet. I looked around my apartment like one of them might already be lurking in a corner. Nothing. Just my sad little bookshelf and a plant I'd forgotten to water. Okay. So I needed to find some souls, or more accurately, some souls needed to find me. I didn't have to wait long. The knocking started at 3 a.m., not on my door, on the inside of my window, on the 7th floor. I walked over slowly, pulled back the curtain. A man was floating outside the glass, translucent, blue-tinged. He was wearing a construction vest and had the expression of someone very confused about where he was. I opened the window. "Hey," I said. "You can see me?" he asked. "Apparently." He floated a little closer. "I don't know how I got here. I was on a site. There was a beam, and then you weren't," I said. He nodded slowly. I looked at the system prompt that had appeared immediately above his outline. The system gave me 2 options the moment I focused on him: guide him toward passing on and let him go in peace, or bring him in and give him something to be part of. I looked at the ghost. He seemed like a decent enough guy. "I have 2 options," I told him. "I can help you pass on, or I can kind of keep you." He stared at me. "Keep me? You'd be part of my ability. You'd have purpose, and honestly, from what I can tell, you're not going anywhere fast on your own." He thought about it, which is a weird sentence to write about a dead guy. "Would I still be me?" he asked. "I think so. More like a part of me, but yeah." He was quiet for a moment, then, "My wife's already gone. 5 years ago." "I'm sorry." He looked at his translucent hands. "Nothing left for me to stick around for, I suppose?" "Sure," he said. "Why not? Better than nothing." The system processed it instantly. No delay. No confirmation prompt. Just done. I flexed my fingers. Felt slightly sturdier. Marginally more solid. Marcus's presence settled into the back of my mind like a warm weight. Not intrusive. Just there. "You comfortable?" I asked, feeling slightly insane for asking. "Surprisingly," his voice said, now coming from somewhere behind my thoughts. "Nice in here. Quiet." "Good. Get some rest. We've got things to do." I closed the window and went back to bed. For the first time in years, I slept without dreaming about her. Morning came. I made coffee, looked at myself in the bathroom mirror. Same face, same dark circles, same guy who got murdered last week. Except now there was something different in my eyes. Hard to describe. Like a door had been opened somewhere deep inside me and the light from the other side was still leaking through. I sat at my kitchen table and started thinking. Kyle had pushed me off a building. I had died. The universe had handed me a second chance and a soul-based superpower. What was the plan? Option A, go straight to Kale, reveal I was alive, dramatic confrontation, probably get pushed off something again. Option B, disappear entirely, start over somewhere new, never look back. Option C, play dead, stay off the radar, build power quietly, come back when I had enough leverage to make it actually count. Option A was satisfying but stupid. Option B was safe but felt like letting them win. Option C was the move. I opened my laptop and searched for my own name. Asher Vane. Tragic fall from rooftop apartment. There it was. Page 3 results. Small article. Barely 100 words. The official story was that I'd gone up to the roof after drinking and lost my footing. There were witnesses, apparently. People who saw me stumble near the edge. People who were probably Kale's friends. Sarah was quoted in one line. "He was going through a difficult time. It's heartbreaking." I read that sentence 4 times. Then I closed the laptop before I did something I'd regret. "Easy," Marcus said from somewhere in my head. "I'm fine." "You're gripping that coffee mug like it owes you money." I set it down, took a breath. "What would you do?" I asked him. "Me? I'd pick up a hammer and build something," he said. "But that's just me." "Metaphorically, Marcus." "Oh, I'd wait. Get strong. Make sure when you show up, they can't do anything about it." I nodded. That matched option C. "Wait. Get strong. Come back when it counts." The system seemed to agree with option C entirely because a new message appeared almost immediately in front of my eyes. That last line was not standard system language. It had a personality behind it that the rest of the text didn't. I stared at it for a full second. That last line was not standard system language. I had a feeling the system had a personality. Great. Another voice in my head with opinions. The next soul found me 2 days later. I was walking through the park near my old office, hood up, avoiding anyone who might recognize me. Technically, I was dead. Showing up at my old job would be awkward. She was sitting on a bench, young, maybe 20, translucent in the way all the unbound ones were. She was watching the pigeons with tremendous focus, like if she stared hard enough, they'd finally make sense. "Hey," I said, sitting beside her. She turned, blinked. "You can see me?" "Yeah, name's Ash." "Lily?" she said. "I've been sitting here for what feels like a week. Nobody sees me. I've been screaming at people. That's not great. It's extremely frustrating, she said very precisely. What happened to you? She was quiet a moment. Car accident, 3 weeks ago. I keep waiting to wake up. You're not going to wake up, Lily. She looked at the pigeons again. I know, I just keep hoping. I told her about the options, same as with Marcus. She listened carefully, didn't panic, just thought it through. What would I do if I integrated? She asked. You'd be part of my ability. I'd be stronger. You'd have purpose instead of sitting on this bench screaming at pigeons for eternity. She considered this. Well, what was your ability again? Soul dominion. I can perceive and command unbound souls. So you'd command me? More like we work together. Marcus hasn't complained yet. Who's Marcus? My other soul. He was a construction worker. Lily looked at me for a long moment. You're a very strange person, she said. I died and came back with ghost powers. Strange doesn't cover it. She almost smiled. Fine. Okay. Better than the bench. The system registered it instantly. Lily Chen, graduate student, biochemistry. That one was immediately useful. Lily's presence in my mind felt different from Marcus's. Lighter, more precise. Like a well-organized filing cabinet had just been installed behind my left eye. Cozy, she said from somewhere behind my left temple. You two get along? I asked internally. He's fine, Lily said. A bit loud. I'm not loud, Marcus said. I'm enthusiastic. Two souls in my head bickering already within the first 5 minutes, just like I had always dreamed my life would go. Over the next 2 weeks, I found them in unexpected places. An old professor who died mid-lecture and was still trying to finish his point about 19th century economics. I integrated him, got a history and rhetoric bonus, started being significantly more persuasive in conversation without even trying. It was a little alarming, honestly. A former chef who'd had a heart attack in his own restaurant. Integrated. Got culinary knowledge I'd never earned, plus enhanced sensory perception for taste and smell. A retired soldier named Ray who'd gone quietly in a hospital bed and didn't know where to go after. Integrated. Got tactical thinking and a significant boost to physical reflexes. Each one settled into me differently. Each one added something I hadn't had before. By the end of week 2, I had 7 souls. The system kept a quiet tally. On day 17, everything changed. I was in a diner, booth by the window, eating eggs I hadn't had to make myself, which felt like a genuine luxury after 2 weeks of hiding. I felt her before I saw her. Not a her as in a woman, a her as in an entity. Cold, deliberate, carrying the kind of weight that made the air thin just by existing inside it. She sat across from me. The woman from the waiting room. Dark coat, dark eyes. That same stillness that made the booth feel like a waiting room all over again. The diner didn't react. The waitress walked right through her path without noticing, because of course she wasn't there in any way that normal people could perceive. You're still alive, she said. Technically, yes. You shouldn't be. And yet. I gestured to my eggs. Breakfast. She looked at me with an expression that was not quite irritation, but was somewhere in that zip code. You were sent back, she said. That's unusual. So I was told. Clerical error in my favor. The error created an anomaly, she said. Your soul is not functioning normally? My soul is functioning great, I said. I've got 7 others helping it along. Her eyes sharpened. For the first time, something resembling genuine surprise crossed her face. 7, she said flatly. 7. You integrated 7 unbound souls. The system suggested it. They all agreed. Nobody was coerced. She was quiet for a long moment. I kept eating my eggs. I came to collect you, she said finally. I looked up. Collect me. Your continued existence is creating instability. Unbound souls are gravitating toward you instead of passing on. Because I'm giving them a better option than wandering around screaming at strangers. That is not your role. The guy at the desk gave me this role, I said. He literally handed me a card. He is a clerk, she said, the word carrying distinct contempt. He processes. He does not authorize. So you're here to drag me back. I'm here to collect your soul and restore the natural order. I set down my fork. The thing about having 7 souls inside you is that when someone threatens you, it's not just you who reacts. Marcus went tense. Lily went sharp. Ray ran contingencies. The professor started formulating arguments inside my skull. I felt all of them activate at once, a quiet army behind my sternum, all 7, pointing in the same direction at the same moment. Try it, I said. She reached across the table. Her hand came toward my chest. The moment her fingers made contact, she stopped. Her eyes went wide. Actually wide. The first genuine surprise I'd seen from her. She pulled her hand back slowly. What, she said carefully, is in you? 7 people who decided they weren't done yet. She stared at me. I stared back. Someone in the diner ordered pancakes. You cannot be collected, she said slowly, like she was just now understanding it. Correct. Your soul is interlocked with 7 others. To remove yours would require removing all of them simultaneously. Which would take what exactly? She said nothing. More than you've got right now, I guessed. The look on her face told me I was right. She sat back, studied me with those unreadable dark eyes. You are an anomaly, she said. People keep saying that. It is not a compliment. I know, but I'll take it. I picked up my fork again. Are we done here? Because the eggs are genuinely getting cold. She didn't move, just kept looking at me. You integrated them willingly, she said. They chose this. Every single one. Why? I thought about it. Because the alternative was worse. Wandering forever with no purpose. At least with me, they've got something. She was quiet again. A different kind of quiet this time. Not calculating. Almost considering. I cannot leave an anomaly unmonitored, she said finally. Okay. I will need to observe you. I blinked. Observe me. Until I determine whether you are a threat to the natural order or simply an inconvenience. Those are my only 2 options? Yes. I thought about the implications of having death sit across from me in diners indefinitely. On one hand, deeply inconvenient. On the other hand, having death nearby when Kale figured out I was alive had a certain appeal. Fine, I said. But I have conditions. She looked at me like I had just suggested we both dye our hair pink. You, she said, have conditions. I died unfairly. I came back. I'm building something here. If you're going to hang around, you stay out of my way. You don't interfere with my ability. You don't touch my integrated souls. And if I do not agree, then I go find a way to make myself more uncollectible than I already am. Which, given the rate I'm going, won't take long. She looked at my system display, which apparently she could see too. She folded her hands on the table. For death, she had a very human quality of looking deeply tired of a situation. I will observe, she said at last. I will not interfere, but I will not assist you either. Fair. And if you become a genuine threat to the natural balance? Then we renegotiate, I said. Deal? She looked at me for a long, silent moment. Deal, she said. Then she was gone. No dramatic exit. Just gone. The waitress appeared. Can I get you anything else? More coffee, I said. Please. I sat there for a while after, 7 souls chattering softly in my head, death now watching from somewhere nearby, Kyle and Sarah out there thinking I was dead, and 3 more souls to find before I leveled up. Round 2, I thought again. But this time I actually meant it. The 3rd soul I needed turned out to be standing in the elevator of my building. I noticed him immediately. Construction uniform, translucent edges, confusion radiating off him in waves. He looked maybe 30. Big shoulders. The kind of guy who looked like he was specifically built to carry heavy things through difficult spaces. You're new, I said as the elevator doors closed. He startled. You can see me? Yeah. How long have you been stuck in this elevator? He thought about it. Hard to say. Time's weird. He paused. There was an accident at the loading dock. I'm sorry. He shrugged, the kind of shrug that meant he was still processing. And there are a few of us around here. We talk sometimes. Word gets around. He looked at me with something between wariness and hope. They said you give us a choice. I do, she said. What's it like, being integrated? He looked at me with something real in his eyes. I considered how to answer that honestly. Marcus says it's quiet, I said. Lily says it's purposeful. The professor says it's stimulating. The soldier says it's the first time he's felt part of a unit since he left the service. The big man listened to all of this. Then, my name's Dion. Ash? What would I bring to the table? The system answered before I could. Organization, I said. Logistics. Memory for spaces and layouts. He nodded slowly. I could always remember every route, every layout, every floor plan of every building I ever worked in. That would transfer to me. He was quiet for a floor or two. Then, yeah, okay. Better than the elevator. The system confirmed it instantly. Dion Price was in. 8 out of 10. I walked to my apartment, feeling more complete than I had since I came back. The next 2 found me within 24 hours of each other. Number 9 was a teenager named Jin, who had drowned in the river 2 months ago and was still showing up to his high school every morning out of pure habit. He'd been sitting in the back of a classroom every single morning, watching kids who couldn't see him take notes on a math lesson. It was one of the saddest things I'd ever seen. I sat beside him, told him. He cried. The kind of deep, quiet crying that doesn't make any noise. Then he said yes. He settled into me and immediately started analyzing traffic patterns on the street below. Kid energy, constant and relentless. "You're going to be a handful," I told him internally, already feeling the kid energy buzzing around my thoughts. "I'm going to be great," he corrected. Already. Number 10 came to me on her own terms. I woke up at 4 a.m. to someone sitting at the foot of my bed. Old woman, white hair, wrapped in a shawl, looking at me with clear, calm eyes. "You're the young man who takes them in," she said. "I am. I've been watching you for a week. I wanted to make sure you were genuine." "And?" She nodded once. "You're genuine. What's your name?" "Eleanor. I was a doctor for 40 years. Retired. Had a good run." She smoothed her shawl calmly. "I've been dead for 3 months. I've talked to 8 of your people. I have the full picture." I liked her immediately. "Medical knowledge," I said. "Diagnostics. Empathy." "I'd hope so," she said. 40 years. She held out her hand, a formal gesture. I reached out and took it. Duration scales with dominion level, manifestation strength scales with the soul's life experience, current manifestable souls, all. I sat up in bed and stared at the ceiling for a very long time. I could project them, physically manifest them. Marcus could lift things. Dion could interact with spaces. Ray could fight. They weren't just voices in my head anymore. They were, in the most literal sense, a team. I heard a sound from somewhere outside my window. I got up and looked. She was there, standing on the fire escape. Dark coat, arms folded, watching me with those unreadable eyes. "You felt the level up," I said through the glass. "Yes." "And?" "You're more anomalous than before," she said. "That's the direction I'm heading, yeah. I am reconsidering my threat assessment." "Reconsidering toward what conclusion?" She said nothing, just looked at me. I opened the window. Cold air came in. "The people who killed me," I said. "They think I'm dead. They're out there living their lives." She said nothing. "I'm going to come back, not to destroy them, but to make sure what they did doesn't get buried." "I'm not here to enforce justice," she said. "No, but you're here." She looked out over the city. Something shifted in her expression. The smallest thing, almost undetectable. "You should sleep," she said. "You have much ahead of you." "You say that like you know." She almost answered, stopped herself. I watched her on the fire escape for another moment. Then I closed the window and went back to bed. 10 souls. Level 2, soul manifestation unlocked. Kyle was out there. Sarah was out there, and I was here. Alive. More than alive. All 10 of them settled in the back of my mind like constellations. A soft, collective presence, almost warm. I thought about the rooftop. That cold shove, the long fall. I thought about Kale's face. I slept 4 hours and woke up with a plan. Not a complete plan, more like the outline of one. But after 19 floors and 2 weeks of building an army of dead people, an outline felt like progress. Step 1, money. I was technically dead. My bank accounts were frozen. My apartment lease was in a ghost's name. The world thought Asher Vane had fallen off a roof after drinking. "Dion," I said quietly. "Yeah," Dion's voice came back. Calm, focused. "The storage facility on Mercer Street. 3rd floor, Bay 14. Is there a way in that doesn't involve the front desk?" A pause. Then Dion, with the precision of someone who memorized floor plans for a living. "Loading entrance on the south side, usually unmanned after 6 p.m. Security camera has a blind spot on the left approach. Keypad is a Loxon 4400 with a documented override sequence if the code fails 3 times. I blinked. "How do you know about Loxon 4400 override sequences?" "Site logistics. We dealt with those panels on 3 different projects. You learn these things." I decided not to think too hard about that. At 6:30 p.m., I was at the south entrance of the Mercer Street facility. Dayon talked me through the approach, the blind spot, the panel. Inside Bay 14, exactly where I'd left it 2 years ago. Camera equipment, a box of old documents, and a fireproof box under a false bottom I'd built myself. Inside the box, $8,000 in cash, kept in neat bundles. An emergency passport under the name Thomas Ward, courtesy of a paranoid uncle, and a small notebook filled with account numbers for an investment account I'd opened at 22 and completely forgotten existed. I flipped to the last entry, 34,000, untouched. Marcus made a sound that was his version of a low whistle. "Not bad for a dead guy," he said. "It's a start," I said. Eleanor began cataloging what I'd need medically. Ray started thinking about what tactical supplies 34,000 could buy. Jin started running probability calculations on optimal use of funds. This was my brain now, 10 people thinking simultaneously, all of them useful, all of them pointing in the same direction. It was, I had to admit, significantly better than the brain I'd had before. I pocketed the notebook, took the cash, and left. 3 blocks away, I stopped at a payphone that was somehow still functioning in the city. I called the number I'd memorized. It rang twice. Novak Investigations. "I need a meeting," I said. "Someone referred me. I can't say who over the phone." A pause. "What kind of job?" "Surveillance, research, and I need help staying off the grid while I work." "Tomorrow, 11 a.m. "I know the address," I said. I hung up, walked back to my building. She was on the fire escape again. I'd started thinking of her simply as the Reaper. "You're moving quickly," she said. "Is that a problem?" "It is an observation." I leaned against the window frame. The city spread out below us, all amber light and distant noise. "You know who pushed me," I said. It wasn't a question. She knew everything. That was the nature of what she was. "I do," she said. "Are you going to tell me anything useful?" "I am not here to assist you." Which was technically our agreement. Still annoying. "Right," I looked at the skyline. "But you're not stopping me either." She said nothing. I interpreted that as progress. "Can I ask you something?" I said. She waited. "Do you actually feel anything when you collect someone?" A long pause. The longest yet. "I observe the end of a life," she said finally. "Whether that constitutes feeling is not something I have resolved." "That's a very careful answer." "I am a very careful entity." I looked at her. Really looked the way I hadn't quite let myself before. There was something deeply lonely about her. Not sad. Not suffering. Just alone in a way that had gone on so long it had become structural. Eleanor, from somewhere in the back of my mind, said quietly, "Careful with that one, dear." I knew what she meant. I looked back at the city. "Good night," I said. She didn't answer, but she was still there when I went inside. The meeting with Novak Investigations the next morning was straightforward. A small office above a dry cleaner. A woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and the organized stillness of someone who had seen everything and quietly filed it. Underdone. Her name was Dana Novak, 15 years as a detective before going private. She looked at me across the desk. "Who are you, really?" "Someone who needs research done on 2 people and needs to stay off any systems while doing it. Cash only, no trail." "Names?" "Cale Mercer, Sarah Yoon." She wrote them down without expression. "And your interest in them?" "Complicated history." "That's not an answer. It's all I've got right now." She studied me. The empathic perception Eleanor had given me picked up. Cautious, assessing, not hostile, professionally skeptical. "Cash only," she said. "No digital trail on my end either." "That works. 5,000 up front. 5 more when I deliver." I put the cash on the desk. She looked at it, looked at me. "You're not going to do anything stupid with what I find you," she said. It wasn't quite a question. "Define stupid," I said. "Anything that puts me in a witness box." "Nothing like that. I just need to know where they are, what they're doing, who they're connected to." She picked up the cash, started counting. 2 weeks, she said, "depending on how deep this goes." "Take your time," I said. "I'm in no rush." That was a lie, but a convincing one. Lily said immediately, "Your resting heart rate spiked during that last statement. You should really work on that." "Thank you, Lily. Anytime." I spent the next week building the foundation. A new phone under Thomas Ward. A rented room in a building with no cameras, paid in cash by a man named Thomas Ward, who the landlord described as quiet and kept to himself. Meanwhile, the system was evolving. New prompts appeared every few days. I started practicing in the rented room. It started small. Marcus first, because he was the most settled in. I focused, pulled on his presence, asked him to step forward. A shape formed in the air beside me. Not solid, exactly. More like heavy smoke that had decided to develop strong opinions about things around it. Marcus's outline, broad shoulders, work vest. He looked at his hands, flexed them. "Huh," he said, with a voice that came from outside my head for the first time. "How does it feel?" I asked. "Strange. Light. Like I'm made of the idea of myself." "Can you touch things?" He reached out and pressed his palm against the wall. The wall didn't move even slightly, but his hand didn't pass through either, which was the important part. There was actual resistance. Actual contact. "I can push," he said. "Not hard, but I can push." I filed that away. Then Ray, the soldier. His manifestation came out sharper than Marcus's, more defined. The posture automatic, the focus immediate. He looked around the room the way soldiers look at rooms. Threat assessment, entry points, cover positions, all of it processed in about 2 seconds. "What's our objective?" he asked. "Currently, practice." "Understood." I spent 3 hours with all of them cycling through manifestation. Marcus could lift objects up to about 20 pounds before flickering. Ray could move at close to double normal human speed in short bursts. Jin, when manifested, could interact with electronic systems in ways that shouldn't have been possible, and which he couldn't fully explain, and which I decided to simply accept as a feature. Eleanor, when manifested, emitted a calm that physically affected the people around her, a kind of walking sedative effect that she found moderately interesting from a physiological standpoint. The professor could speak with an authority that made people instinctively listen, even when they couldn't quite explain why they were agreeing. Lily could analyze compounds just by being near them. Dion could map any space he entered and communicate that map directly to my mind within seconds of arrival. By the end of the week, I had something that looked less like a guy in a rented room and more like a unit. I sat on the edge of the bed and ran through everything that had changed in the last few days. The system updated quietly in my peripheral awareness. That last line was new. We have been waiting. I stared at it for a long time. What do you think that means? I asked the room. It means the system has feelings about this, Lily said. Systems don't have feelings, the professor said. This one does, Jin said. I've been watching it. It responds differently based on emotional context. What is it then? I asked. A pause. Then Jin very carefully. I think it might be a person, or it was once. I sat with that for a while. The next day, Dana Novak called. Earlier than expected, she said. Your two subjects, they're not being subtle. Tell me, she told me. Cale Mercer had, in the 3 weeks since my supposed death, moved into a significantly larger apartment in the north of the city. He'd gotten a promotion at his firm too, the kind that required a senior employee to vacate their position very suddenly under unclear circumstances. Sarah Yoon had moved in with him, 2 weeks after my death, officially. Though Dana noted with careful neutrality that the logistics of the move suggested she'd been spending time there for considerably longer than that, I listened to all of this without saying anything. Eleanor was reading my emotional state the whole time. Ash, she said gently. I'm fine, I said. You are not, she said. But that's also fine. Dana gave me the full address, the daily schedule, the names of the key people in their orbit, and then one other thing, quieter than the rest. The senior employee who resigned. His name is Victor Crane, 62, 30 years at the firm. He's been quietly trying to reach a journalist. What kind of journalist? Financial crimes desk at the Courier. Someone named Mira Saul. I thought about Victor Crane. 30 years at that firm, forced out, looking for someone who would listen. A man who almost certainly knew exactly what Cale had done. Dana, I said, can you find out if Crane has spoken to Saul yet? A pause. I can look. That's another 2,000. Find it. She hung up. I sat in the rented room in the gathering dark. Cale had done this before. This was a pattern, a deliberate method. He didn't just take things. He built a foundation first. He made sure the people who might stop him were removed or compromised well in advance. He'd removed me. He was working on Crane. Who knew who else was already on his list? The soldier Ray spoke quietly. He's systematic. Yes. Systematic enemies are dangerous, but they're also predictable. I know. You have 10 people who want to help you. I know. Then let us. I stood up, walked to the window. The city at night, amber and dark, alive in ways that had nothing to do with me. She was there. Of course she was. The Reaper on the fire escape, arms folded, dark coat in the dark air. You heard all of that? I said. I hear many things, she said. Kyle is going to hurt more people. She said nothing. Not a natural order thing, I said. A justice thing, which you said isn't your department. It is not, but you're still here. She looked at me, those dark eyes catching no light but somehow still visible. Your anomaly is expanding, she said. You are becoming harder to monitor from a distance. So you need to stay close. Functionally, she said. I looked at her for a moment. Can I at least know your name? I asked. A long pause, the longest one yet. Marin, she said. Just the one word, like it cost her something. Marin, I repeated. Okay. She looked away, back at the city. Go to sleep, Ashervane, she said. Tomorrow will require you. I went back inside. 10 souls. 1 Reaper on my fire escape. $34,000 and a plan that was starting to have edges. Cale thought I was dead. He was right, technically. Some version of me had died on that rooftop. But the version that came back was something he hadn't planned for. Something none of them had planned for. I lay down, stared at the ceiling. All 10 of them settling into their quiet rhythms in the back of my mind. A soft, collective presence, almost warm. Marcus, get some sleep. Lily, your cortisol is elevated. Rest will help. Jin, I found a route to Cale's office building that has no working cameras. Just so you know, for later. Ray, good. Eleanor, good night all. The professor, Indeed. Rest well. Dion. I mapped the building layout already. Whenever you're ready, I've got it. I closed my eyes. The city hummed. Marin watched from the fire escape, and somewhere across town, Cale Mercer slept in his new apartment with no idea that the dead had opinions about it. Round 2? I was completely done thinking it. Time to stop rehearsing and actually start doing something about all of this. If you already have a favorite character, drop them in the comments. And if you want to see what happens when Ash finally stands in front of Cale, you know what to do. I woke up on day 23 with a message from Dana and a headache I hadn't earned. The message was short. Crane met Soul. Tuesday, coffee shop on Aldner Street. 2 hours. I sat up and read it twice. Victor Crane had made contact with the journalist, which meant he was ready to talk, which meant whatever Cale had on him wasn't enough to keep him quiet anymore. That was either very good news or the beginning of something that would get complicated fast. Probably both. In my experience, those two things travel together. Ray, I said quietly. The soldier's presence sharpened in the back of my mind immediately, always alert, never fully off. We going somewhere? He asked. Coffee shop, Aldner Street. I need eyes on a meeting between a burned employee and a journalist. Surveillance, he said. Easy. What's the threat profile? Unknown. Cale might have people watching Crane already. If he does, I need to know before Crane does. Ray processed that for about half a second. We go early. Scout the location, identify exits and sight lines. Exactly. Dion immediately piped up with the layout of every coffee shop within 4 blocks of Aldner Street from memory. I let him talk. The information was useful, and stopping him would have been rude. I got dressed, ate something that approximated breakfast, and was out the door well before 7. The early morning city felt like borrowed time. The city was doing its morning thing around me. Buses, dog walkers, the specific tired energy of people who had somewhere to be. I moved through it like a ghost, which, given my current situation, felt appropriate. I had practiced being invisible now. 2 weeks of being technically dead will do that for a person. Aldner Street was quiet at that hour. A bakery, a dry goods store, the coffee shop in question, a small place called Ember, tucked between 2 taller buildings like it was trying not to be noticed. I liked it immediately. Good instincts on Mirasol's part. A place like this had plenty of ambient noise, multiple exits, and sight lines that favored someone who arrived first and chose their seat carefully. I went inside, ordered something, took a corner seat with my back to the wall and a clear view of the door. Ray approved of the positioning from somewhere behind my left ear. High praise from a soldier. For the next hour, I just watched. 3 regulars who came in before 8. A couple who lingered too long over 1 coffee each. A man in a gray jacket who read the same page of his newspaper 4 times. That last one bothered me. Jin, I said internally. The guy in gray by the window. Am I being paranoid, or is he watching the door? A pause while Jin ran his pattern recognition across everything he'd observed. He's watching the door, Jin said. 3rd time he's checked his watch in the last 12 minutes. He ordered nothing. The newspaper hasn't turned a page in 40 minutes. He's waiting for someone specific. Cale has people here, I said. Already. Looks like it, Jin said. Which means Crane is being monitored. Which means this meeting is already compromised before it starts. I thought about that carefully. Crane was about to walk into a coffee shop where someone was already watching for him and had been there for a while. Saul was going to show up thinking this was a private meeting. And I was sitting in the corner trying to figure out which of my options was least terrible. Eleanor said, if you warn them, you reveal yourself. I know. If you don't, they have this conversation in front of a witness and Cale knows everything within the hour. I know that too. What are you going to do? I looked at the man in gray. I looked at the door. I thought about Victor Crane, 62 years old, 30 years at a firm, currently trying to do the right thing in a situation where doing the right thing could get him seriously hurt. Marcus, I said, how solid are you feeling today? Marcus's presence shifted. The warm weight of him gathered and focused. Pretty solid, he said. Why? Because I need you to manifest. Just for a minute. Just enough to make someone spill their coffee. There was a brief pause. Then Marcus said, with the energy of a man who had been waiting to be useful, tell me where. I focused. Drew Marcus forward the way I'd been practicing all week. His shape materialized beside me, visible only to me in the dim light of the corner. Heavy smoke, broad shoulders, work vest. He crossed to the man in gray's table in 3 steps. I watched from my seat as Marcus positioned himself directly beside the man's elbow. He pushed, not hard, just enough. The coffee went sideways. The man in gray lurched up, swearing, grabbing napkins, suddenly completely occupied with the disaster on his lap and the table and the floor. His attention fractured entirely. I was already moving. I walked to the door, stepped outside, and caught the first person I saw who looked like they belonged to a newsroom. Dark coat, notebook sticking out of a bag, walking fast. Mirasol? She stopped, looked at me. Who's asking? Someone who knows why Victor Crane wanted to meet you and also knows there's a man inside that coffee shop who's been watching the door for the last hour. Her expression didn't change. Not a flicker. Good journalist instincts, or just a lot of practice being lied to. Walk with me, she said. We walked. Half a block away, she stopped and looked at me properly. Early 30s, sharp eyes, the kind of face that had heard a lot of people lie to it and gotten very good at knowing when they were doing it. Who are you? She asked. Not important right now, I said. What's important is that whoever Crane is about to name, that person already knows this meeting was happening. Which means Crane is completely exposed before he's even walked through the door and sat down. This meeting can't happen here. How do you know about this meeting? Same way I know about Cale Mercer, I said. Her expression finally moved, just slightly, just enough. You should call Crane, I said. Tell him to go somewhere else, somewhere he picks, not suggested by anyone. She studied me for a long moment. Why would I do anything you say? Because I'm the only person on this street who's trying to help you and I'm not asking for anything in return. Another moment stretched between us on the sidewalk. Then she pulled out her phone without another word and dialed. I walked away while she made the call. I didn't need to stand there and listen. I just needed it to happen, and it would. Behind me, through the coffee shop window, I could see the man in gray mopping coffee off his jacket with the expression of someone whose morning had just gotten very complicated. Good. I kept walking. Nice work, Marcus, I said internally. Anytime, he said, settling back into the warm weight behind my sternum. I like being useful. You are, I said. All of you. I spent the next 2 days moving carefully, checking in with Dana, processing what I was learning about Cale's orbit. The picture was becoming clearer, and it was not a comfortable picture to look at. Cale Mercer had been at this for a while. Not just with me. Dana had found a pattern going back at least 3 years before I became relevant. Career moves that shouldn't have been possible. People who resigned suddenly. One person who had a breakdown severe enough to require hospitalization. All of them connected to Cale's upward trajectory. All of them removed just before he needed the space they occupied. It was methodical, patient, the kind of thing that looked like luck from the outside, but was something very calculated when you laid it all on a table. He's been building towards something specific, Lily said. She had taken to analyzing the information I fed her the way she'd probably analyzed her biochemistry data. Systematically, without sentiment. And what kind of something? I asked. That depends on what's at the top, she said. Follow the chain. Who benefits when Cale reaches wherever he's going? That person is either behind this or about to be replaced by him. I thought about that. The professor added, Historically, men like this do not operate alone. They require patrons, someone who opens doors in exchange for results. So there's someone above Cale, I said. Almost certainly, the professor said, with the tone of someone who had studied this pattern across centuries. There always is. Men like Cale do not self-organize. That changed things. If Cale had a patron, then removing Cale without understanding the full structure would just cause a reorganization. Someone would step in to replace the function Cale served. The problem wouldn't be solved, just shifted sideways. I needed to understand the whole thing before I moved on any of it, which required more information than I currently had, which meant I needed to find a way to get closer to the center without being seen. The system, as if reading my thoughts, offered a new prompt. Proximity. Mission detected. Target, Cale Mercer. Suggest approach vector. Soul resonance. I didn't know what that was yet. But the system had been right about everything so far. What's soul resonance? I asked the empty room. Soul resonance. When fully developed, allows host to share perception with integrated souls simultaneously. All 10 perspectives available at once. Combat and observation capabilities multiply accordingly. 10 perspectives at once. I sat with that for a moment. 10 sets of eyes, 10 sets of skills, all running in parallel inside one body. That would be overwhelming, Eleanor said. Initially, Lily said, but the cognitive load would distribute across all of us. We'd essentially be processing it together. Like a distributed network, Jin said, already deeply and visibly excited about the concept in the way only Jin could get about something like this. Ray was quiet for a moment, then, in tactical terms, that's the difference between 1 scout and 10. The information advantage would be significant. So we need to get close to Cale, I said. Let's get close to Cale. Nobody argued with that. Nobody had a better idea. We went with it. The next morning I made a decision I knew was risky. I went to his office building. Not inside, just outside. standing across the street and a coffee cup in hand like any other person who had somewhere nearby to be. I watched the entrance for 2 hours. Daeon mapped the flow of people in and out with the calm efficiency of someone who had spent his career optimizing exactly this kind of thing. Jin tracked patterns. At 9:15, Kale came out. I recognized him immediately. Same walk, same shoulders, same quality of moving through the world like it belonged to him by right. He looked good. That was the thing that hit me first, and that I wasn't prepared for. Kale looked well-rested and confident and like a man whose life was going exactly according to plan. Because it was. Because I was dead and everything had worked out for him, and he had no reason to look anything other than exactly like that. I felt something cold move through me. Not grief, not exactly. More like the moment you understand something you suspected but hadn't confirmed yet. The moment the abstract becomes specific. He had done this and then slept fine afterward. Ash, Eleanor said. Just the one word. Steady and quiet. Like a hand on a shoulder. I breathed. Kept my face neutral. Kept watching. Kale crossed the street 2 blocks down and went into a building I didn't recognize. A different firm, not his regular office. I noted the address. Passed it to Jin, who filed it immediately. 20 minutes later, Kyle came back out. He was with someone. Older. 60 maybe. The kind of man who moved like he was accustomed to rooms rearranging themselves around his arrival. Who was that? I asked. Jin was already on it. Dion cross-referenced the building address. The professor studied the body language from the composite image Jin was building in my mind's eye. That building houses 3 firms, Dion said. Financial advisory, a private equity group, and something called Voss Meridian Partners. The professor said, the body language is interesting. Kale defers to him. Not overtly, but he defers. The older man leads. Voss Meridian Partners, I said. Jin, what do you know about them? Not much from stored memory, Jin said, but that meeting lasted exactly 19 minutes. That's a scheduled meeting. Recurring, probably. Not a social call. Nobody does 19 minutes accidentally. I watched the older man get into a car. Black, private plate. He didn't look back at Kale once as he got in. He didn't need to. That told me everything. That's the patron, I said quietly. That's the person above Kale. Probably, Lily said. We need more than probably, I said. Then we get more, Ray said. I kept watching. Kale stood on the sidewalk for a moment after the car pulled away. He checked his phone. Something on the screen made him smile. A specific kind of smile. Small and satisfied and private. I knew that smile. I'd seen it before. The night before I died, actually. When I'd told him something I thought was a secret. He'd smiled exactly like that. I just hadn't understood what it meant at the time. I understood now. I turned and walked away before he could look up. Kept my pace even. Kept my hands loose. Kept the cold thing inside me very, very quiet. You okay? Marcus asked, quiet and genuine. Working on it, I said. That's not the same as yes. No, I said, it's not. But it will be. That evening, Dana Novak called with something new. Crane met Saul, she said. Different location. Private. They talked for 3 hours. Good, I said. What came out of it? Saul is building a piece, Dana said. Financial crimes. Buried transactions going back 4 years. Kale's name comes up indirectly. But the person at the actual center of the transactions isn't Kale. She paused deliberately. It's someone named Aldrich Voss. Does that name mean anything to you? There it was. Voss? I said. As in Voss Meridian Partners? Silence on Dana's end. Then, you already know about Voss? I saw Kale meet with someone this morning outside the Meridian building. I didn't have a name until now. Then you're ahead of where I thought you were. What do you know about Voss? I asked. Aldrich Voss, Dana said. 63. Built Voss Meridian from nothing 20 years ago. Technically clean, actually very dirty. Financial crimes desk has been trying to pin something on him for 2 years. He's careful, always has someone between himself and anything traceable. Someone like Kale, I said. Someone exactly like Kale, she said. Your friend isn't the top of this. He's the buffer layer, which means if Soul's piece runs and Kale goes down, Voss walks away. I thought about that for a long moment. Kale as the expendable middle layer. It fit the pattern exactly, and it fit the way Kale operated. Useful enough to be promoted, compromised enough to be controlled, disposable when the time finally came. Kale thought he was climbing. He was being positioned for a fall. Kale doesn't know he's disposable, I said, more to myself than Dana. Probably not, she said. They never do. She hung up. I sat in the rented room and thought about Kale Mercer, my former best friend, who had pushed me off a building on behalf of a man named Aldrich Voss. He believed he was climbing. He was just being positioned for the fall. There was something almost sad about that. Almost. I didn't feel sorry for him. I want to be clear about that. Whatever Voss had asked him to do, Cale had chosen to do it. He'd chosen me. He decided that I was the thing that needed to be removed. But understanding the structure changed what needed to happen next. If I went after Cale directly, Voss would just find another Cale. The problem was Voss. Cale was a symptom. "You're thinking about this differently than you were yesterday," Eleanor observed. "Yes," I said. "Does that concern you?" "No," she said. "It means you're actually planning rather than just wanting." I appreciated Eleanor. She had a quality of saying the exact thing you needed to hear in the exact tone that made it land without being painful about it. 40 years of medicine? It showed. The next morning I woke up to Maren on the fire escape. Not unusual. She was there most mornings now. What was unusual was that she was looking at me with something different in her expression. Not the calculating assessment she normally wore. Something more direct. "What?" I asked through the glass. She held up a single finger. "One moment," she indicated. Then, after the pause, she said with careful precision, "You altered the course of that journalists' meeting yesterday. Deliberately?" "I did," I said, "by warning her." "Yes? Is that a problem?" "No," she said slowly. "It is not. But it is a deviation from what I expected." "What did you expect?" "For you to observe, to gather information, to stay hidden." "That was the plan," I said. "Plans change." She studied me. "You protected two people you have no personal connection to. Crane was going to be exposed. Soul was going to walk into a trap. It was the right thing to do." "The right thing," she repeated, like she was testing the weight of the phrase. "Yes," I said. "That concept still functional in your department?" She almost smiled. "Almost." "I will note," she said carefully, "that the journalist has now begun her investigation in earnest. The piece she is building will, if published, cause significant disruption to Voss's operations." "I know," I said. "I may have had exactly that in mind when I decided to warn her on the sidewalk. I'm not going to pretend otherwise." She looked at me for a long moment. The cold morning air moved between us. "You are constructing something larger than revenge," she said. "Yes," I said. "Does that change your assessment of me?" A pause. "It complicates it," she said. "Everything about you complicates things." I opened the window, leaned against the frame. "Maren," I said, "what would it take for you to actually help me?" She went very still. "I told you, I do not assist." "I know what you said. I'm asking what it would take for that to change." A different question. She heard the difference. The city hummed below us. A long silence. Then she said, and each word came out like it was being carefully selected from a very specific inventory. "If I were to assist," she said, "it would require that what you are doing serve something genuinely and substantially beyond yourself and your personal grievances. Does this not serve something beyond myself?" "The revenge component is significant," she said. "The rest is becoming more significant," I said. "It is not there yet," she said, "but it is moving." That was more than she'd ever said in that direction. I didn't push it further. "Get some sleep," I said instead. "I don't sleep," she said. "I know that. I'm being polite about it." She looked at me for a moment that went a little longer than it needed to. "Good night, Asher Vane." "Good night, Maren." The Soul Resonance mission required proximity to Cale, the system had said. Not confrontation, not interaction, just proximity, within 50 meters for a sustained period. I thought about where that was achievable without being seen. His office building was possible, but risky. His apartment building was worse. Public spaces were better, but required him to stay in one place. Dion, immediately. He goes to the same gym every Tuesday and Thursday at 7 a.m., 3rd floor. Treadmill facing the windows, 40 minutes, then waits for 20. "How do you know that?" I asked. "I mapped his area yesterday while you were sleeping," Dion said, completely unbothered. "You asked me to track patterns." "I did," I said. "Good work." The gym, 3rd floor, windows facing the street. I could get close enough from the building across the street if the angle was right. Jin confirmed the geometry would work within a few seconds. The system confirmed 50 meters would be sufficient for initialization. Thursday morning. I was in position before 7, a coffee in one hand, a view of the gym's 3rd floor windows from an alcove across the street. At 7:04, Cale appeared in the window. He got on a treadmill, started running, looking out at the city with the expression of a man who had everything sorted. 30 minutes I stood there, watching Coyle run on a treadmill while the system did something complicated in the architecture of my ability. I could feel it changing, deepening, like new rooms being added to a house I already lived in but hadn't fully explored. The integrated souls shifted, all 10 of them moving into new positions in my awareness, less like separate voices and more like different channels available simultaneously. Then the resonance clicked, and everything changed. I don't have a good word for what it felt like. 10 sets of attention, all available at once, all focused through the same pair of eyes. Marcus's structural instinct reading the building across from me in real time. Lily's analytical sight cataloging every compound in the air. Dion's spatial memory laying the entire street grid over my vision. Jin's pattern recognition flagged a man who had passed this alcove twice already, and was about to make a third pass at the same unhurried pace. Ray's tactical thinking noted that the man had no coffee, no phone, no apparent destination, which meant he was covering this specific block for a reason. "We have company," Ray said, with the calm voice of someone who had expected this. "How many?" "One visible, probably two. Standard coverage pattern for a single approach. Voss's people or Kale's?" "At this level, same organization," Ray said immediately. "The chain of command runs straight through, unified structure." I didn't panic. Panicking with 10 people simultaneously inside you feels extremely crowded and is not useful to anyone involved in the situation. Instead, I thought clearly and quickly the way I'd been learning to. The man was going to pass me in about 12 seconds. He hadn't identified me yet. I was just a person with a coffee. I walked, not fast, not slow, the pace of someone who had a destination and was moderately interested in getting there. Turned the corner, kept moving. "Second one?" I asked. "Northeast corner," Ray said. "Stationary, watching the gym entrance." "They're covering Kale," I said. "Not looking for me specifically." "Correct," Ray said. "We're fine." We were fine. I walked 3 blocks and stopped in a bakery doorway and let the resonance settle into its new configuration. 10 streams, all clear, all available. The words that followed were not in the system's usual clean formatting. They looked like something pushed through from somewhere else entirely. "I have been watching you longer than you know. What you are building is important. The man above Kale is not the top, either. There are levels you cannot see yet. Be careful with the Reaper. She is more than she appears." I stared at that message for a long time. The source. Jin had suspected the system was a person, or had been one. This seemed to confirm it. Someone was watching. Someone who knew about Voss and knew he wasn't the top. And whoever they were, sitting somewhere in whatever remained of them, they had a very specific opinion about Marin. I thought about Marin. Dark coat, dark eyes, the way she had started to look at me differently. The way she had said it is moving when I asked if what I was doing served something beyond myself. Be careful with the Reaper. She is more than she appears. I already knew she was more than she appeared. That was obvious from the first diner conversation. What I didn't know was what more meant in her specific case. I filed the message, walked back toward the rented room. My mind running 10 streams simultaneously, all of them processing different pieces of what I now knew. Kale was a tool of Voss. Voss was not the top. There were levels above that. The system had a source that was something like a person, and they were invested in what I was doing. And Marin was standing on my fire escape every morning watching me with expressions that kept shifting toward directions she clearly hadn't intended. That evening I made dinner. Actual food cooked on an actual stove, which felt like an act of defiance against the general chaos of my current life. The professor immediately began narrating historical examples of people who cooked elaborate meals during crisis periods. Nobody had asked him to. He seemed to find it soothing, and I let him continue. Marcus talked about construction projects he'd worked on. Lily talked about a paper she'd been writing before she died, still visibly upset she hadn't finished it. Dion quietly optimized the kitchen layout in his head. Ray observed the cooking process with the focused attention of someone cataloging tactical information. Jin asked 17 questions about the chemistry of cooking that Lily answered mostly correctly and argued about once. Eleanor told them all to behave, and there was a brief and genuinely funny argument about whether the concept of behave even applied to integrated souls. This was my life now. 10 dead people and a Reaper on my fire escape. I looked at the window. Marin was there, dark coat, arms folded, looking at the city. I went to the window, opened it. "You could come inside," I said. "I don't need to come inside," she said. "That's not what I asked." A pause. Then, with visible reluctance that she made no effort to hide, she stepped through the window into the apartment. She stood in the middle of the small kitchen, looking like something that had arrived from somewhere fundamentally different, and was making a genuine effort to tolerate the furniture. "Sit down," I said. She sat. I put food in front of her. She looked at it. "I don't eat," she said. "I know. Humor me." She looked at the food, then at me. Then, very slowly and precisely, she picked up a fork and took a small, careful bite. Something crossed her face. Not pleasure exactly. More like recognition of a sensation that had been absent for a very long time. "Well, when did you last eat?" I asked. "I don't remember," she said. That told me a great deal. We sat in the small kitchen for a while. 10 souls quiet in the background, the city outside doing its thing. Marin eating small bites with the careful attention of someone relearning something important. "Can I ask you something personal?" I said. She waited. "How long have you been doing this?" "Collecting?" "Yes." "Longer than this city has existed," she said. "Longer than most things you would recognize." "Do you remember being anything else?" A very long pause. The longest one yet, and pauses with Marin already ran long. "There are things I remember," she said, "that I cannot place in any context I currently understand." "That sounds like yes," I said. She set down the fork, looked at her hands. "The message in your system today," she said. My skin prickled. "You saw that?" "I see most things that touch your system," she said. "What it said about me?" "Yes," I said. "She is more than she appears," she said quietly, like she was reading something written about someone she used to know a long time ago. "What does that mean to you?" I asked. She was quiet for a moment. "I don't know," she said. "And that is genuinely unusual for me. I usually know things about myself." She stood, moved back toward the window, stopped. "The source of your system," she said, not turning around, "it is not unknown to me." "Who is it?" "Someone who should not be able to communicate through those channels," she said. "Someone who was removed from those channels a very long time ago." "Removed by whom?" She turned then, looked at me with those dark eyes that caught no light. "By the same structure that decided your death was acceptable," she said. "The same structure that sits above Aldrich Voss." The room went very quiet. Even the 10 souls were still. "There's a connection," I said, "between what happened to me and what happened to whoever is in that system." "There is more connection than you yet understand," she said. And the way she said it told me she understood it already. "Then help me understand it." She was quiet for a moment. "I told you what it would take for me to help," she said. "Is this not serving something beyond yourself?" I asked. She looked at me for a long, careful moment. Something in her expression that I was starting to recognize. Not quite a decision, the edge of one. "Come find me tomorrow," she said. "I will show you something." Then she was gone. Out the window and into the dark city, without the sound of footsteps or the movement of air. The apartment was quiet. "Well," Marcus said. "That was something." "Yes," I said. "It was." "She's going to help you," Eleanor said. Not a prediction. A diagnosis delivered with complete clinical certainty. "Maybe," I said. "She's going to help you," Eleanor said again. "She already is. She just hasn't admitted it to herself yet." 40 years of reading people. It showed. I cleaned up the kitchen, turned off the lights, lay down on the plain bed in the rented room under the name Thomas Ward, and looked at the ceiling. The source of my system had been removed by the same structure that sat above Voss, the same structure that had decided my death was acceptable. This was not about Kale anymore. It maybe never had been. Kale had been the hand. Voss had given the hand its instructions. And above Voss was something I couldn't yet see. Something that reached far enough to remove people from the channels that connected the living to whatever came after. That was not a small thing. Something that had been very comfortable, thinking it was safe because the dead stay dead and don't come back with systems and soul armies. Then I woke up and changed that assumption. Jin spoke quietly from the back of my mind. "Should I start mapping what we know? Build the full structure?" "Yes," I said. "Build it. Everything we have." "On it," Jin said, already working. Ray said, "Whatever this is, it's bigger than I thought when we started." "Yes," I said. "Does that change things for you?" "No," he said. "Just means we need to be smarter." "Agreed," Lily said. "The structure above Voss. If they have that kind of reach, they'll have noticed you by now." "Probably," I said. "They sent watchers for Kyle," Lily said. "If they know you're watching Kale, they might send watchers for you." "Let them come," Ray said immediately. "We don't do that," Eleanor said firmly. "We plan carefully. We don't invite conflict we aren't prepared for." "Eleanor is right," I said. Ray accepted this without complaint, with the particular grace of a soldier who had spent his life respecting the chain of command, even when he disagreed with the call. "Yeah, tomorrow," I said. "Marin shows me something. We learn more. Then we plan." "And Kale?" Dayon asked. "For now he keeps living his life thinking he got away with it." I closed my eyes. Let the 10 streams settle into their overnight patterns. Marcus kept his usual low, warm watch over everything, the way he always did. Eleanor monitored my physical state with the quiet efficiency of someone who had spent 40 years checking on people while they slept. Old habits. Outside, somewhere in the city, Marin was doing whatever Marin did when she wasn't watching me from fire escapes and reluctantly eating small bites of dinner. And somewhere above Aldrich Voss, in a structure I couldn't see yet, Something that had reached far enough to silence a soul in a system was going about its business. Not knowing that the person it had removed was back. Not knowing that the removed person had 10 souls with them. A soldier, a doctor, a kid who could read patterns in anything. An old professor with 40 years of rhetoric. A logistics expert who never forgot a floor plan. A chef who could identify every compound in a room. A construction worker who could assess any structure at a glance. A graduate student who made everything sharper. A young man who made everything tactical, and a physician who kept everyone grounded. And a reaper who was standing on a fire escape every morning and eating small bites of food and showing signs of remembering something she had forgotten a very long time ago. If you want to know what Marin shows Ash tomorrow, drop a comment. And if you're not subscribed yet, the bell is right there. Part 3 is coming. Marin came for me at dawn, not at the window this time. She was standing in the middle of my apartment when I opened my eyes, which should have been alarming, but was starting to feel almost normal. "You said you'd show me something," I said. "Yes," she said. "Get dressed. Leave the phone. What I'm going to show you exists outside of anything that device can reach." I got dressed, left the phone on the counter next to the cold coffee I hadn't finished last night, followed her out the door and down the stairs and into a city that was just beginning to remember it existed. She didn't take me anywhere dramatic. No rooftop, no hidden chamber, no underground tunnel that smelled like old stone and destiny. She walked me to a park 3 blocks from my building and stopped at a bench near the center. "Sit," she said. "Sit," she said. I sat. She sat beside me. The park was quiet in the specific way that parks are quiet before the city fully wakes up. Early joggers, a few dog walkers, a man feeding pigeons, who had clearly been doing this every morning for decades and found it entirely sufficient as a life. "I'm going to show you something that exists between the seen and the unseen," Marin said. "You will need to hold still. Your souls may react. Tell them to remain calm and stay inside." Internally, I passed the message. All 10 settled into a focused stillness. Ray took a breath he didn't technically need. Eleanor put a steadying presence on something that wasn't quite a shoulder. Everyone went quiet and ready at once. Marin reached out and placed 2 fingers lightly against my temple. She held them there for a moment, and then the world changed in a way that didn't announce itself. Not dramatically. Not with light or sound or any of the theatrical effects I might have expected from death touching your head in a park at dawn. It was quieter than that. More like a second pair of eyes opening quietly behind the first ones, taking in everything the first pair had been missing all along. The park was still there. The joggers were still jogging. The pigeon man was still dispensing bread with the calm authority of someone who had made peace with his role in the universe. But layered over all of it, like a second city sitting in the exact same space, was something else entirely. People. People, hundreds of them, moving through the same space the living used at the same time in the same places, but not quite touching any of it. Not the way the living touched things. More like impressions, like the memory of contact, preserved in the space long after the person who made it had moved on to wherever people went next. Some of them were translucent, the way the unbound souls I'd encountered were. Others were different, denser, more settled into the space around them. Like they had been here so long they'd started to belong to it. "What am I looking at?" I said. "The residue of passage," Marin said. "Every soul that moves through a space leaves a trace behind it. What you're seeing is the accumulated record of everyone who has ever sat on this bench, walked this path, fed pigeons in this park. I didn't have a word for it. I tried a few internally and discarded all of them." "Old," I said finally. "Yes," she said. "The oldest traces here go back 400 years. The city was different then. The park did not exist then. But the space itself existed and people passed through it. That never changes," she said. "People always pass through. They leave something behind. Most of them don't know it." I looked at the layers. Some of the older traces were barely visible. Thin impressions of people who had walked through a field where there was now a concrete path. Ghosts of ghosts. The echo of an echo. Recent ones were clearer. A woman who had sat on this exact bench not long ago, still holding the impression of whatever she'd been thinking when she was here. A teenager who had walked through in a hurry. A child who had stopped to look at something in the grass that had seemed important at the time. Why are you showing me this?" I asked. Marin was quiet for a moment. She had a quality of silence that was different from regular human silence. Fuller. Like it contained things she was deciding whether or not to say. "Because the source of your system," she said, "left a trace here. A long time ago. I wanted you to see it before I told you who he was." She pointed. I looked. And there, overlaid on the bench we were sitting on, was the impression of a man. Not old in the way the 400-year traces were old, but older than recent, maybe 60 years. The image of someone who had sat exactly where I was sitting now and looked at something in his hands that I couldn't quite make out. But the quality of how he was holding it suggested it mattered to him very much. The way you hold something when you know you're about to lose it and you're trying to memorize the weight of it before it's gone. Who was he? I asked. His name was Elias, Marin said. He was a collector of unbound souls, the same way you are. The first one I had encountered in several centuries with that particular ability. I turned to look at her. The same ability as me. A version of it, she said carefully. Less developed than what you have now, but the same root ability, yes. The same capacity to see the unbound, to offer them choice, to integrate them into something larger than the wandering they would otherwise do. The system I use, I said, is his. Partly, she said. He built the framework. He had years of work invested in it. And then he was removed before he could complete it. So the system exists in an unfinished state. Which is why it has a personality, she added, with something that was not quite dry humor, but was in that neighborhood. Removed by the structure above Voss, I said. Yes, she said. 60 years ago. The structure has existed for a very long time, Asher. Longer than Kale. Longer than Voss. She paused. What you are dealing with is not a criminal operation that grew too large. It is something that has been managing outcomes for generations. I sat with that. The park moved around us. A dog pulled at its leash toward a squirrel and was gently redirected by a woman who had clearly done this before. The pigeon man finished his bread and folded the bag with the careful precision of someone who did not waste things. Managing outcomes, I said. What does that mean specifically? It means they decide, Marin said. Not always. Not every outcome. But the ones that matter to them, the careers that rise, the ones that fall, the people who live long enough to become dangerous to their interests, and the people who don't. They control. They control death, I said. They attempt to, she said. They do not have authority over the actual passage. That is not something that can be bought or organized, but they have significant influence over the circumstances that lead people to the passage earlier than they were ever supposed to arrive. Elias threatened that, I said. Yes, she said. Someone who could see the unbound, who could give them choice, who could build a record, however incomplete, of every premature death they caused. He was a problem that needed to be solved. She looked at the trace on the bench. So they solved him. I looked at the impression of Elias, at the careful way he held that thing in his hands so carefully. He knew they were coming for him, I said. Didn't he? Yes, Marin said. He had time to embed himself into the system before they reached him. That is how he is still communicating with you now. Through the framework he built 60 years ago, carefully, while they were still coming for him, before they could take the rest of him along with everything else. She said it the way you say something that you have thought about many times and still find difficult. He chose me, I said slowly. When I died unfairly, when the clerk in the waiting room handed me a card, that wasn't a clerical error. The clerk did not act alone, Marin said. The card was placed there deliberately. The ability was not an accident or a clerical error or a stroke of luck. It was a deliberate design that had been 60 years in the making. The 10 souls in my mind had gone very, very still. Even Jin wasn't running calculations. Everyone was just listening the way you listen when something rearranges the way you understand your own story. Why me? I asked. Elias had specific criteria, Marin said. Someone who died unfairly at the hands of the structure's operations. Someone who would understand the scope of what they were dealing with without being destroyed by the understanding. She paused. Someone who was already connected to enough unbound souls to seed the ability properly, without having to build the entire foundation from zero with no head start and no resources and no framework already in place. I wasn't connected to any souls when I died, I said. You were walking past 7 of them on a daily basis without knowing it, she said. Marcus had been following you to work every morning for a month. You walked through the park where Lily sat on a bench every Tuesday without fail. You took the same elevator as Dion 3 times a week. Elias could see the potential before you could, she said. He had 60 years to be patient about it. He was very good at being patient. Something in her voice when she said that told me patience had not made it easier. I sat with that for a long while. The city moved around us. A woman jogged past with the expression of someone proving something to themselves. The pigeons finished the bread with the efficiency of creatures who had been doing this for a long time and dispersed to better opportunities elsewhere. The structure above Voss, I said finally. What is it? Marin was quiet for a moment. The longest pause she'd given me since she told me her name. It has no single name, she said. It is a collection of interests that have been operating together for a very long time, in this city and in others. They do not want the souls of the dead, she said. They have no use for those. What they want is the power that comes from controlling who lives and who dies and when. That kind of control, sustained over generations, becomes infrastructure. It becomes the invisible skeleton underneath everything that looks like natural order. They know I'm alive, I said. Not a question exactly. More like a thought I was checking out loud. They know something is wrong, she said. They do not yet know specifically what. The watchers around Kale are precautionary. They sensed a disruption in the expected pattern after your death, and they are being careful about it. How long until they know it's me? That depends on how visible you become, she said. She turned and looked at me directly. This is what I wanted to show you. Not just the trace of Elias, but the scope. You are not fighting Kale. You are not even fighting Voss. You are working against something that has been doing this for a very long time. You need to understand the scale of it before you make another move. Because the next move you make from a position of misunderstanding could be your last one. And Elias couldn't beat them, I said. Elias was working alone, she said. And then, very quietly, in a tone I hadn't heard from her before, he did not have 10 souls, and he did not have someone who understood what I understand about how they operate and where they are most exposed to pressure. I looked at her. That's the most direct thing you've ever said about helping me. She looked away. Do not make too much of it, she said. I'm noting it, I said. Not making too much of it, just noting. We sat on the bench for a while longer. The trace of Elias slowly becoming more visible to me the more I focused on it. The man who had built a system 60 years ago and embedded himself in it. Who had waited for someone he would never meet to be handed a card by a tired clerk in a waiting room. Elias, I said quietly. Not to Marin, to the trace, to whatever remained of the man who had done 60 years of invisible work on my behalf before I existed. I got your message. I'm working on it. The trace didn't respond. Of course it didn't, but something in my system shifted. A warmth that hadn't been there before, like something had registered the acknowledgement and was satisfied with it in a quiet way. Eleanor said from somewhere very still in my mind, He's been waiting a long time. I know, I said. Let's not make him wait any longer than we already have. We walked back to my building without talking much. At the door, Marin stopped. There is one more thing, she said. The structure will move against you eventually. Not through Kale, not through Voss. The actual structure will move directly. When? When you become visible enough that they cannot ignore you. You are currently beneath their threshold of concern. That is your most valuable asset right now. How do I stay beneath the threshold while still doing what needs to be done? She considered this. The careful consideration of someone who actually knew the answer and was deciding how much of it to share. You don't disrupt their operations directly, she said. You disrupt the people they use. You remove their tools without touching the hand that holds them. You make the local infrastructure unusable without giving them a clear target to respond to. Kale and Voss, I said, without touching the structure directly. Yes, she said. If Kale faces real consequences, and if Voss is exposed by Soul's peace, the structure loses its local infrastructure in the city. They will have to rebuild their local infrastructure from nothing. That process takes time, considerable time. And time is what we need. And while they're rebuilding, you become stronger than they are ready for, she said. Strong enough that when they finally look at you directly, the cost of removing you is higher than the cost of leaving you alone. She paused. That is the actual goal here, not victory in any conventional sense. Deterrence, making the cost of removing you higher than the cost of tolerating you. She turned to go. Marin, I said. She stopped. Thank you. She didn't say anything, but something in the set of her shoulders was different as she walked away. Less guarded than before, not open, but less closed. Inside, I sat down and told all 10 of them everything. The full picture, Elias, the structure, the scope, the strategy Marin had outlined. I laid it all out, and then I let them process it in their own ways, because that was what they needed, and because 10 perspectives on new information were considerably more useful than one. Marcus was quiet for a moment. Then, so we don't go at the top directly. Not yet. Smart, he said. You build the foundation before you put up the walls. You don't start with the roof. Marcus had spent 30 years in construction, and it showed in the way he thought about everything. Removing the local infrastructure while staying below the main threshold. Solid, tactical approach. Classic indirect action. You degrade their operational capacity without giving them a clear target. They can't respond effectively to something they can't identify clearly. That asymmetry is the whole strategy, and we have to protect it. Lily, the journalist piece on Voss is already in progress. If Soul can corroborate Crane's information with solid financial records, Voss could face real and significant exposure. That's our best lever right now, and it doesn't require us to be visible at all. Jin, I've been mapping the connections. Jin, I've been mapping the connections in the background. Voss has at least 3 other active operations in this city that follow the same pattern as what Dana found. If Soul's piece only covers the main one, the others stay active and the structure adapts around the gap. The professor. The historical precedent is clear on this. Large control structures have always had this specific vulnerability. Remove the visible layer, and they must expose themselves to rebuild it. That exposure window is precisely where they are most vulnerable to further pressure. Dion. I can map all three, Dion. I can map all three of Voss's satellite operations if you give me a day. Physical locations, traffic patterns, the people who move between them. That information might be extremely useful for Soul if we can get it to her without revealing where it came from. Eleanor. Be careful. We are moving faster than might be wise, and speed creates errors. The structure has been operating for generations. Another week of patience on our end will not cost us anything that matters. Eleanor's right, I said firmly. We move carefully. Soul's piece goes first. We let that do the work we cannot do visibly without exposing ourselves. We don't do anything that puts us in the open until we understand exactly what we're dealing with at every level. Agreement from all 10. Even Ray, who I suspected found the word careful genuinely difficult to sit with. That afternoon I reached out to Dana Novak. I need you to find something specific, I said. Voss Meridian Partners. Not just the main operation. Any satellite activities in this city that follow the same pattern, forced resignations, unusual asset transfers. People who left organizations suddenly and quietly without much explanation. Dana was quiet for a moment. That's a bigger ask than before. I know. What's the number? This scope? 15,000. And it will take 2 weeks minimum. Probably closer to 3. Do it, I said. I'll have the first payment to you by tomorrow morning. She accepted without pushing further. Dana Novak was good at her job precisely because she knew when not to ask questions. She hung up. I looked at the remaining cash. 19,000 left after Dana's first installment. It would run out before this was over. I needed a way to fund the operation that didn't involve completely draining a dead man's emergency savings and leaving nothing in reserve for emergencies that were surely coming. Jin had already been thinking about this. He thought about things in parallel with everything else. It was one of the more useful qualities of having a 17-year-old pattern recognition specialist living in your head. The investment account, he said. It's under your name and you're technically dead. Accessing it directly would raise flags. But the account is old enough that the original terms allow for a beneficiary claim through a private instrument. I don't have a beneficiary listed, I said. Thomas Ward could be listed as a beneficiary through a private instrument, Lily said carefully. It would require a very specific kind of legal arrangement drafted in exactly the right way. But it's genuinely not impossible, given the account structure and the age of the original terms. The professor cleared his throat with the slight, theatrical quality of a man who had spent 40 years being the most knowledgeable person in any given room and had not entirely let go of it. I may be able to help with the theoretical framework. I spent 30 years teaching contract law alongside my primary field. The instrument would need to be carefully worded, but it could work. I sat with that for a moment. The system of me, all 10 of them, working on the logistics of funding a covert operation against a generational control structure, using a dead man's investment account and a contract law professor who technically only existed inside my head. Normal week? Do it, I said. I'll trust the professor on the legal framework. Jin, you model the financial path and identify anywhere it could come back to bite us. Lily, you check the instrument for anything that could raise flags. Between the three of you, this should be manageable. 3 days later, the financial path was clear, the account accessible, and the funding stable for at least 6 months of the level of operation we were running. And on that same day, Dana Novak delivered something I hadn't asked for and hadn't expected. You wanted satellite operations, she said. I found 2 so far, working on the 3rd. But I also found something else. Something you didn't ask for but need to know. Tell me. Cale Mercer is being set up to take a fall, she said. Voss is moving assets, quietly, systematically, creating a documentation trail that leads directly and specifically to Cale and nowhere near Voss himself. I sat with that for a long moment. Kyle was being positioned for removal. Not by me, by the man above him. The expendable middle layer being prepared for disposal exactly the way I had predicted, and the professor said it always went. When? I asked. Based on the documentation pattern, 3 to 4 weeks, Dana said. They'll probably time it to coincide with the journalist's piece. Let it look like Cale was the source of everything Voss did, and Voss was just an employer who was deceived by a trusted employee. Clean exit for the top. All the weight lands on the buffer. I thought about Cale, about the smile on his face outside the gym that morning. The satisfied private smile of a man who thought he had everything sorted and was just enjoying watching it all proceed according to plan. He had no idea that the plan had a second page he'd never been shown. That the same person who had given him the tools to remove me was currently writing his exit from the story. He has no idea, I said. No, Dana said. They never do until it's actually happening to them. That's what makes the position effective. She paused. What do you want to do with this information? Good question, the kind of question that had more than one answer depending on what you actually wanted the outcome to be. Kyle had pushed me off a building. He deserved consequences for that. I had not spent 3 weeks building an operation and integrating 10 souls just to let Cale Mercer walk away clean. That was not the outcome I was working toward. That was not the version of events I had spent 3 weeks building toward. That was not happening. But Voss walking free while Cale took the full weight of everything was not justice either. It was just the structure protecting itself, using the same mechanism it always used, sacrificing the layer beneath it to absorb all the damage while the layer above rebuilt itself quietly somewhere nobody was watching. If I let Voss's plan proceed, Cale went to prison, and Voss stayed clean and built something new with someone new, and the structure continued exactly as it had been continuing for generations. Soul's peace would have limited impact. Elias's 60 years of work would achieve something, but not enough. But if I intervened before Voss could execute the setup, Cale would know something had changed. Questions would be asked at levels I couldn't control. The watchers around him would report back. I would become visible before I was ready to be visible. Don't do anything yet, I said. Keep watching the documentation trail. I need to think. She agreed and hung up. I sat in the rented room with 10 dead people and a problem that had more edges than I had originally planned for. You feel something about this, Eleanor said. Not a question. Her empathic perception was reading my emotional state with the precision of someone who had spent 40 years doing exactly that professionally. Yes, I said. Is it sympathy? No, I said. It's more complicated than that. Tell me, she said. He deserves consequences. He deserves consequences, I said. But he deserves consequences for what he actually did, not for being set up as the fall guy for someone else's much larger and older operation. There's a difference between those two things, and the difference matters more than most people ever stop to think about. There's a difference between justice and letting Voss run his own version of it, Lily said. Yes, I said. Exactly that. So you need a third option, Ray said, with the directness of someone who had spent his whole life identifying third options in situations where only two were visible. Cale faces real consequences for what he actually did. Voss doesn't get to control the narrative, and you stay invisible while it happens. That's not an easy third option, I said. No, Ray agreed without any hesitation, but it's the right one. The right answer and the easy answer are rarely the same thing. I've never found it useful to confuse them. The professor said, the journalist, Sewell, has the financial piece on Voss. If she also had evidence specifically linking Cale to your death, that changes what he faces and precisely how he faces it. It's not Voss's carefully constructed narrative designed to protect himself. It's the actual truth about what Cale did on that rooftop. I looked at that idea from several angles at once, with the benefit of 10 simultaneous perspectives working on the same problem from different starting points. The risk was clear and it was significant. Linking to my death meant revealing I hadn't died, which meant either accepting that my cover was blown completely or finding a way to surface the information without surfacing myself. Can the evidence exist without me? I asked. What do you mean? Lily asked. The roof. The security camera from the building across the street. There was one. I walked past it every time I went up to meet Cale on that roof. It covered the access door. It would have had a line of sight to at least part of what happened. Jin was already working before I finished the sentence. His manifestation flickered at the edges, with the focused energy of someone who had found exactly the right problem to apply himself to. I can access building management systems in manifested form, Jin said. I've done it before. If that camera recorded the night in question and the footage still exists in their archive system, I can retrieve it cleanly. How long would it take to get in and get out cleanly? I asked. Depends on their security setup, Jin said. An hour. Maybe significantly less if their archive system is as basic as most building management systems tend to be. He paused. Without leaving a trace is entirely optional for me at this point. I choose not to when it matters. And this matters. So, no traces. That night, Jin manifested fully. I kept watch by the window while he worked. 23 minutes later, he was back inside me with a 17-second clip from a camera mounted on the building directly across from the rooftop. It wasn't perfect footage. The angle was from below and across the street, looking up at the roofline, but it caught enough. The two figures near the edge. The movement that was clearly a shove and not a stumble. The fall. I watched it once. The clip was short. It was very specific about what it showed. That's enough, I said quietly when it ended. That's more than enough to change what Soul's peace becomes if she has it. I held the clip in the format Jin maintained inside my system. Evidence that existed in a form no one could access. Except through me. For now. The question was how to get it to Saul in a way that couldn't be traced back to whatever remained of Asher Vane. Anonymous source, Lily said. Journalists protect anonymous sources. It's the foundation of what investigative journalism is built on. She'd want to verify it, I said. She's a financial crimes journalist being handed footage of a murder. She'd be extremely careful about where it came from and whether it was real before she touched it professionally. Then we give her a way to verify it independently, the professor said, with the particular satisfaction of a man presenting a solution he'd been building toward for several minutes. The camera still exists. The archive still exists, presumably, sitting right there on the building management system where anyone with the credentials could find it. If she receives the clip anonymously and then finds the original source through her own investigation, the verification is entirely her own. She doesn't have to trust us. She finds the evidence herself. We just show her where to look. He paused. It's the difference between handing someone a conclusion and handing someone a path. The path is always more credible. It was a good plan. Complicated but good. The kind of thing that required timing and patience, the willingness to let someone else do the visible work while you stayed behind the curtain and made sure the curtain never moved. Elias had done this for years, apparently. Built a system. Worked from the unseen layer where normal detection couldn't reach. I was starting to understand why he'd had to embed himself in the architecture to keep the work going after they removed him. So it couldn't die with him, so it would be waiting for whoever came next. The next morning, Jin drafted the message. Brief, anonymous. It contained the clip compressed and encoded in a format that could only be opened with specific software we also included instructions for. And a single line of text. The roof camera across the street from the building at this address still has the original in the archive. The building management system. Username and password below. We routed it through 7 different servers across 4 countries and 2 separate routing protocols. Jin said it was completely untraceable. He said it in the tone that made clear he would be personally and professionally offended if it wasn't. The message went to Saul's encrypted journalist inbox at 3 a.m. on a Wednesday, when no one who mattered was watching anything. We had given her the tool and the path to independent verification without asking anything from her in return. What she did with it from that point was entirely and completely hers. I walked back to the rented room and slept 4 hours and woke up feeling like something had shifted in a direction I couldn't fully see yet but could feel the weight of moving. That morning there was a message from the system, not a mission prompt, another message from the source, from Elias. Coming through the 60-year-old framework in the particular way his messages came, slightly different in texture from the standard system output, like something that had traveled a long way to get here. She will find it. She is very good at this. The timing is important now. When the piece runs, the structure will move faster than you expect. You need the Reaper before that happens, not as an observer, as an ally. This is the part I could not do alone. I read the message 3 times in the quiet of the rented room. Then I went to the window. Marin was there. She always was in the mornings now, standing on the fire escape with her arms folded and her dark coat collecting no light from the city below. I need to talk to you, I said. Come inside. She came inside without argument, which was itself a kind of answer. We sat across from each other at the small kitchen table, the same table where she had eaten small, careful bites of food and looked at her hands afterward like they had done something surprising. Elias sent another message, I said. I showed it to her. She read it. Something crossed her face. Complicated. The expression of someone receiving information they had already suspected was coming, but were not quite prepared to confront directly in this form on this particular morning. He is asking me to commit, she said. Yes, I said. Not just observe, not just monitor my anomaly status and file reports with whoever you file reports with. Actually be on my side when this moves. She was quiet for a long time. The particular quiet of someone who is not absent but is working through something that has weight. I didn't push. Eleanor had told me that the most effective thing you could do when someone was processing a significant decision was to give them space. Let them arrive at it themselves without interference from outside. Pushing just created resistance where none needed to exist and made things harder than they had to be. Marin looked at the table, looked at her hands. The same gesture she'd made before when she'd eaten the food and seemed surprised by the sensation. Like she was checking whether something was there that she had expected to have forgotten. I remember Elias, she said. That was new. She hadn't said that before. Not in those words and not with that directness. You remember him specifically, I said. Not a question. I collected him, she said. 60 years ago. He did not go quietly. Most people do. Most people are ready by the time I arrive, whether they know it or not. He argued, she said. He argued, she said. The corner of her mouth moved in a way that might have been the ghost of something like recognition of a memory. He argued for quite a long time, considerably longer than most. longer than anyone I had encountered in the span of several centuries of doing exactly this work. He was persistent in a way that was genuinely unusual. What did he argue? That the work wasn't finished, that the system wasn't complete, that whoever came after him would need more time to do what he had started and had not been allowed to finish. She looked at the wall behind me, the way people look at things that aren't there but that they can still see. I told him the work was not my concern, that I was there to collect, not to evaluate the merit of what was being left behind. She paused. And he told me that one day the person I was collecting would be connected to something larger than either of us understood, and that when that happened, I would have to make a choice. She was quiet. He was describing you, I said. Yes, she said. I did not know that at the time, but looking at it now, from this side of 60 years, yes, he was describing exactly this. Outside the city did its morning thing without consulting either of us about it. Inside the small kitchen, a reaper sat across from a dead man who had come back wrong and thought about a choice that had been set up 60 years ago by a man who spent his last moments arguing with her about exactly this. What does committing mean to you? I asked her. What it costs, she said. Tell me, I said. If I actively assist you, I'm operating outside my function, she said. That is not without consequences on my end. Entities in my position who deviate from their function attract the attention of things that are considerably older and less patient than the structure above Voss. How much attention? Enough that I would need to be careful, she said. Enough that the assistance I provide would need to be worth the exposure it creates for me. She looked at me steadily with those dark eyes that caught no light. Are you worth it, Ashervane? I thought about Elias arguing in the waiting room for 60 years through a framework he'd built before they could finish removing him. I thought about Marcus and Lily and Ray and Dion and Jin and Eleanor and all the others. People who had chosen to stay and be useful rather than pass on to whatever came next. I thought about Victor Crane, 62 years old, doing the right thing because a stranger had warned a journalist on a sidewalk. About Mira Saul building a piece that was going to cost her something significant before it was done. About the woman whose impressions still sat on this bench. About all of the traces in the park that Marin had shown me. All the people who had passed through spaces and left something behind. I don't know, I said honestly, but I believe what I'm doing is worth it. Marin held my gaze for a long moment without looking away from it. Then she reached across the table and placed her hand flat on the surface between us. Not touching me, just there, present. A gesture that in human terms would have meant something very specific. Something like, I'm in. Something like, I've decided. Something like, I'm going to do this, and I know what it means, and I'm doing it anyway. When the piece runs, she said, tell me what you need. Something in my chest that wasn't quite a heartbeat registered the shift. 10 souls simultaneously reacted in 10 different ways. Marcus with warmth. Ray with immediate focus. Eleanor with the particular satisfaction of a correct diagnosis. Jin with logistical enthusiasm. Lily with analytical relief. The professor with the quiet recognition of a historical pattern completing itself. The professor said, very quietly. The professor said, very quietly, the voice of a man who had spent 40 years studying turning points and knew one when he was inside it. This is one of those moments. Yes, I said. It is. That evening I sat in the rented room and made a list of what we had. Not because I needed to, because making the list made it real in a way that just knowing it didn't quite achieve. A journalist building a piece that would expose Voss and potentially bring Kale down for what he'd actually done, rather than what Voss wanted him blamed for. A 17-second clip of my murder, sitting in Jin's internal archive, compressed and encoded and waiting patiently to reach the right set of hands. A 60-year-old framework built by a dead man who was still communicating through it because he had made himself part of its architecture before they could finish removing him. A construction worker who assessed any structure at a glance. A biochemist who made everything sharper. A soldier who made everything tactical. A logistics expert who never forgot a single floor plan. A doctor who kept everyone grounded. A teenager who could move through digital systems like they were suggestions. A doctor who kept everyone grounded and read the room better than anyone I'd ever met alive. A 17-year-old who could move through digital systems like they were made of suggestion rather than code. A contract law professor who had opinions about everything and was usually right about most of it. A chef who could identify every compound in any room he entered. A retired logistics coordinator who had already mapped every building in a 12-block radius just because it seemed useful to do. And a reaper who had just agreed to help, who had placed her hand on a kitchen table in a rented room and said, "Tell me what you need," and meant it in a way that I was still processing the full weight of. And a structure above all of it that didn't know I existed yet. That would change. It would change soon enough, and there was nothing I could do to slow that particular clock. The best I could do was make sure that when that clock ran out, I was significantly more ready than they expected me to be. I stared at that last line for a long moment. Then I actually laughed out loud in the empty room, which felt like exactly the right response. I actually laughed out loud in the rented room under the name Thomas Ward, with 10 dead people inside me, and death having recently agreed to be on my side. It was the kind of laugh that comes from a situation being so specific and strange that humor is the only accurate response to it. Elias says hi, I said out loud. He sounds like someone I would have liked, Marcus said, with the warmth of someone who recognized a kindred spirit at a distance. He sounds like someone who got things done, Ray said with the approval of someone who had one primary metric for evaluating people. He sounds like someone who would have had very strong opinions about my unfinished paper, Lily said, in the tone of someone who found that both annoying and quietly appealing. He sounds like someone who understood the long game, the professor said. Most people don't. They think in terms of the next move. He thought in terms of the next generation. He sounds like someone who was very lonely, Eleanor said quietly. Nobody argued with that one. I looked at the window. Marin was back on the fire escape, but she wasn't watching the city tonight. She was watching the door, facing inward toward the apartment rather than outward toward the street. The direction had changed. It was a small shift, but everything about Marin communicated in small shifts, and I had gotten good at reading them. Tomorrow, I said, we plan for when the piece runs. We figure out what Voss does when he realizes he can't control the narrative the way he planned to. We think about how the structure responds when its local infrastructure goes down, and we make sure we're positioned ahead of all of it before any of it starts moving. 10 voices in 10 different ways said some version of yes, Marcus. Ready. Ray, already planning. Lily, already modeling. Jin, already mapping. Eleanor, careful but ready. The professor, intrigued. Dion, already laying out the logistics. The chef, whose name was Theo and who spoke rarely but usefully. Ready. The construction worker whose name I'd learned was Pete and who was quiet in the same steady way Marcus was. Ready. I looked at the system prompt, still waiting for acknowledgement. I looked at the window where Marin stood watching the door. I thought about the bench in the park where Elias had sat 60 years ago, holding something he was about to lose and trying to memorize the weight of it. Mission accepted, I said. Not to the system, to him, to all of it, to the 60 years of work that had been waiting for someone to pick it up and carry it forward. The system registered it with a quiet pulse that felt less like a notification and more like a breath. Outside, the city did what cities do at night. It kept going, indifferent and continuous and full of people who didn't know what was moving toward them. People who had no idea that a dead man and 10 souls and a reaper who had just remembered how to choose were sitting in a rented room on a Wednesday night, getting ready to change something that had been running unopposed for a very long time and had assumed it always would. I lay down on the plain bed, looked at the ceiling, let all 10 of them settle into their overnight patterns around me. The system was quiet in the way it got when it had done what it needed to do. Elias was quiet. Marin was on the fire escape watching the door instead of the city. The city hummed below in its usual continuous way that had nothing to do with any of us. Round 3, I thought. And this time, we weren't just building. We were ready to move. If you're already thinking about what Marin does when the piece finally runs, tell me in the comments. And if you're not subscribed yet, now's the time. Part 4 is where everything we've been building actually lands. The piece ran on a Thursday morning at 6 a.m. I know because I was awake when it happened. I'd been awake since 4. Sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee I kept forgetting to drink, running through contingencies with Ray and Jin while the others slept in the quiet way that integrated souls slept. The notification came through Jin first. He had a passive monitoring thread running on Soul's publication, and every major news aggregator within reach of Voss's name. It's live, Jin said, at exactly 6:03 a.m. Front page digital, financial crimes, special report, full byline, photography. The kind of package that meant they had been working on it for months and were confident in every word. I pulled it up on the laptop Thomas Ward had purchased 3 weeks ago from a cash-only electronics store 2 blocks from the rented room. The headline was clean and direct in the way that good journalism tends to be when it has the evidence to back itself up completely. Voss Meridian Partners, 30 years of engineered exits. I read it twice, standing up before my brain processed what I was looking at. I read the first 3 paragraphs standing up at the kitchen table because I couldn't make myself sit down. Sewell had done the work. All of it. The financial transactions. The documentation trail Dana had found. Victor Crane's testimony, anonymized but detailed enough to matter. And at the bottom of the 4th section, a paragraph I hadn't expected. New evidence suggests criminal conspiracy extends beyond financial crimes. A source provided footage of an incident on a rooftop in the Meridian district 14 months ago. The footage, independently verified through building archive records, appears to show a deliberate assault connected to the network of individuals documented in this investigation. She found it, Jin said, with the specific satisfaction of someone whose untraceable routing had just been independently validated. I told you she would, Lily said. She's very good at this. I set the coffee down and went to the window. Maren was already there. She was standing on the fire escape looking at the city below with an expression I had started to be able to read. Not the calculation, not the assessment. Something closer to attention. The specific attention of someone waiting for a consequence they know is coming. It's running, I said through the glass. I know, she said. I felt it when the piece went live. There was a shift in the weight of certain situations. That's a very Maren way to describe reading the news, I said. She almost smiled. Almost. It was closer than any of the previous almost smiles had gotten, and I noted it without saying anything about it. How long? I asked. Before the structure responds? They will have read it within the hour, she said. The first response will be through legal channels, injunctions, suppression attempts. That will fail. The evidence is too well documented and too independently verified for suppression to work. She paused. The second response will not be through legal channels. Voss, I said. What does he do when he realizes he can't control the narrative? He runs, she said. People like Voss always run when the first layer fails. He has contingencies. Money moved to accounts that don't connect to his name. A property somewhere that doesn't appear in any public record. And Kale? She looked at me. Kale is the documentation trail, she said. Voss has already completed the setup. By the time the legal team start working, every transaction they find will trace to Kale and stop there. Voss walks free unless someone intervenes in the specific window between now and when the legal machinery fully engages. I'd been thinking about this, about the window between the piece running and the legal machinery fully engaging, the narrow gap where the narrative was still fluid. We need to give Saul something she doesn't have yet, I said. She has the financial piece. She has the rooftop footage. She doesn't have the connection between Voss and the structure above him. You don't have that connection either, Maren said. Not in a form anyone can use. Not yet, I said. I turned away from the window. Eleanor, I said. The man Dana photographed going into the Meridian building with Kale, the older one. I need you to help me think about who he is. Eleanor's presence sharpened in the way it did when she was genuinely engaged. What do we know? 63, according to Dana, built Voss Meridian from nothing 20 years ago. 3 separate attempts by the Financial Crimes Desk to build a case. All of them ran dry before they reached him. Cases run dry for specific reasons, Eleanor said. Witnesses recant, evidence disappears, prosecutors move to different positions at convenient moments. He has reach into institutions, Lily said immediately. That's not a Voss-level operation. That's something considerably older and more established. That level of institutional reach takes decades to build. The structure, I said. Voss isn't just protected by the structure. He is one of its visible faces. Has been for a long time. He's been their local operator for 20 years, and they've kept him clean by ensuring every investigation died before it reached him directly. Then the connection you need, the professor said carefully, is not between Voss and the structure directly. It's more specific than that. It's between the specific interventions that killed those 3 investigations and the pattern that proves they were coordinated from a single source. I sat with that for a moment. Jin was already running it. Pattern recognition across 3 failed investigations, looking for the common thread. The one person, or office, or resource that appeared in all 3 investigations at the precise moment each one lost its traction and died quietly without resolution. 12 minutes, Jin said. Give me 12 minutes. I gave him 12 minutes. I used them to call Dana Novak. She answered on the second ring, which told me she'd been awake since the piece ran too. I read it, she said. Saul did excellent work. She had good materials, I said. Dana, the 3 failed investigations into Voss. You found records of them when you were building the file. Do you still have the documentation from those 3 cases? The files you pulled when you were building the original Voss file? A pause. I have some of it. Not all. Why? I need to know who intervened. Not who officially closed them. Who actually intervened. The name that appears in all 3 at the critical moment. Another pause, considerably longer this time. I waited. Dana Novak thought before she spoke, and that was one of the things that made her worth the money. That's a different kind of research, she said carefully. That's the kind of research that puts me in a different category of risk. I know, I said. Name your number. A long silence. This isn't about money, she said finally. I need to know what you're actually doing with all of this. Because I've been building this file for weeks, and I'm starting to see the shape of it, and I need to understand what I'm part of. I thought about what to tell her. about how much of the truth was useful versus how much would simply make her afraid in ways that weren't productive. I'm trying to make sure Voss doesn't walk while Kale absorbs everything, I said, and I'm trying to make sure the people above Voss can't just replace him with someone new and keep going. Silence. Then, the pattern across the 3 investigations. I'll look. Give me 2 hours. You have 90 minutes, I said. The window closes after that. She hung up without agreeing or disagreeing out loud, which with Dana Novak was the same as agreement. It meant she was already working on it. Jin came back in 11 minutes. There's a name, he said. It appears in all 3 investigations at the point where they lost momentum. Not prominently, tangentially. A signature on a reassignment. A CC on an email chain that shouldn't have been there. A procedural flag raised at the exact right moment to delay a warrant application past its expiration. Who? A man named Harlan Seth, Jin said. Deputy Director level. Financial Regulatory Oversight. He's been in that position for 14 years. 3 different administrations. Career civil servant. He paused. He's also on the board of a private foundation that received a significant donation from a Voss-adjacent entity 8 years ago, and again 4 years ago, and again last year. There it was. Not proof of the structure exactly, but a thread that connected to the thread that connected to it. Enough for a journalist who already had the financial piece to know where to look next. I sat at the kitchen table and thought about how to get this to Saul without becoming visible. The anonymous channel we'd used for the rooftop footage was still clean, Jin confirmed. One more use wouldn't compromise it. But I needed to think about what I was actually doing here. I was building a case that would expose the visible layer of something that had been operating for generations. And when that visible layer came down completely, the deeper structure would feel the impact in ways that would take time for them to fully assess. Marin had said, become stronger than they are ready for before they look at you directly. The question was whether I was there yet. Ray, I said, honest assessment, where are we tactically? Ray thought about it with the precision of someone who had spent his life making exactly this kind of evaluation. Strong defensive position. Soul manifestation gives us capabilities most threats can't anticipate. Soul resonance means our information processing is significantly above any conventional counter. Marin's assistance changes the threat calculus considerably. Offensive capability? Substantial. Against conventional threats, we're not seriously challenged. Against whatever the deeper structure can bring, we have limited intelligence on what that looks like. He paused. Unknown threat profile is always the most dangerous kind. You can't plan for what you can't model. That's our biggest risk right now. Eleanor, you are not ready for a direct confrontation with anything operating at the level Marin described, Eleanor said, without hedging. You are ready to withstand the first response, which will be conventional, which is exactly what's coming in the next 24 hours, and we need to be positioned for it before it arrives. The first response, I said, not from the structure, from Voss. Correct, Eleanor said. Voss runs. But before he runs, he removes problems. That is the pattern. You are a problem he doesn't know about yet. But Kale is a problem he knows about very well. I went still. Kale, I said. Kale, who had pushed me off a building. Kale, who had no idea he was about to be sacrificed by the man who had used him. Kale, who was currently sitting somewhere in the city reading the piece that was about to end his career and his freedom. And who didn't yet know that Voss had already arranged the documentation to ensure it ended with Kale holding all of it. He's going to move against Kale, I said. To ensure Kale can't make a deal with investigators, Eleanor said, completing the logic. Before Kale's lawyers advise him to cooperate with investigators in exchange for consideration, Voss will want to eliminate that possibility entirely. I was already standing, already moving toward the window. Marin, I said. She was there. She was always there. Kale, I said. Voss is going to move against him, possibly today, possibly in the next few hours. She looked at me with those dark eyes that caught no light. He pushed you off a building, she said. Yes. He has given you every reason to let this happen. Yes. And? I looked at the city below, at the unremarkable street where unremarkable people were going about their Thursday morning with no knowledge of any of this. And if Voss removes Kale before Kale can cooperate with investigators, the case against Voss stays incomplete. Soul's piece runs, but the investigation it triggers stalls. The structure loses a little, adjusts, rebuilds, and everything we've built toward accounts for nothing. I paused. And also he's a person. And I'm not willing to be the reason a person dies just because they wronged me first. Marin looked at me for a long moment. That is a distinction very few people in your position would make. I'm aware, I said. Help me find him, fast. She closed her eyes. What happened next was something I had seen her do only once before, when she showed me the traces in the park. A quality of stillness that was different from regular stillness, like she was listening to something that operated well below the frequency of any normal human sound and required a different kind of attention to receive. "He's at his apartment," she said, opening her eyes. "He's been there since the piece ran. He's read it. He understands what it means for him. He's frightened." She paused. "There is a car that has been on his street for 40 minutes. It arrived 14 minutes after the piece went live." "Voss's people," I said, "moving fast?" "Yes." She looked at me. "We have perhaps 30 minutes before whoever is in that car receives instructions to act." I was already calculating. The apartment was across the city. 30 minutes was extremely tight with conventional transport and the city traffic on a Thursday morning when the news was already moving. "Jin," I said, "the building. Layout." Jin had it before I finished the sentence. Dan laid the approach routes over it simultaneously. Ray assessed entry options, all of it available at once through Soul Resonance. 10 minds simultaneously on one problem, processing it from 10 different starting points, working in parallel in the way Soul Resonance made possible. "Marin," I said, "can you get me there faster than conventional transport allows?" She looked at me steadily and without immediate answer. "What you're asking is whether I can use aspects of my function to assist you in a way that is significantly outside my parameters." "Yes," I said. "That is exactly what I'm asking, and I understand the weight of what I'm asking for when I ask it." A pause. "I committed to helping when the piece ran," she said. "Yes, you did." Another pause, shorter than the first. Then she held out her hand. "Hold still," she said. "This will feel strange." Strange was an understatement. It felt like the space between one moment and the next had been briefly expanded to the size of a room and then compressed back down, like traveling through the pause between heartbeats. One moment I was standing at the kitchen window. The next I was on a sidewalk 12 blocks from Kale's building. "Efficient," Marcus said from inside me, with the tone of someone evaluating a construction technique. "Let's move," Ray said, already mapping the last 12 blocks through Dion's street grid. I walked fast, not running. Running attracted attention, and attention was the one thing I couldn't afford in the next 30 minutes. Marin appeared beside me, having arrived the same way she always arrived and departed, which was to say without process. "The car," I said quietly, walking. "Tell me about the people in it." She was quiet for a moment, doing the thing she did. "Two," she said. "Professional, the kind who have done this before. They are waiting for a confirmation that hasn't arrived yet. Someone above them is deciding whether to authorize the action." "Who authorizes it?" "Someone who received a call from Voss's private line at 6:47 this morning," she said, 44 minutes after the piece went live. "So Voss is already running this from wherever he's going," I said. "Yes," she said. "He left the city at midnight. 3 hours before the piece ran. He knew it was coming well in advance." That landed differently than I expected. Voss had known the piece was coming, which meant he'd known about Soul's investigation before it was published, which meant he had a source somewhere inside the information chain between Saul's research and the moment of publication. That was a problem for later. "Someone told him," I said. "Yes," Marin said, "which is why the documentation trail pointing to Kale was completed 3 days ago. He had time to prepare." "Soul's source inside the investigation," I said, "or inside the publication?" "That is a problem for Soul to identify and address," Marin said. "Our problem is the next 22 minutes." We reached Kale's building. The car was exactly where Marin had said it would be. Dark, nondescript. 2 people inside who looked like they were simply parked. I walked past without looking at the car and went around the corner to the building's service entrance on the quieter side street where nobody was watching. Dion had the layout. Jin had the access panel code from the building management system. I was inside in 40 seconds, taking the stairs, arriving at the 7th floor where Kale's apartment was. I stood outside his door for a moment. Behind me, metaphorically, were 10 people who had all chosen to be part of something larger than their individual ends. In front of me was the man who had shoved me off a roof. The man who had smiled the small, satisfied smile while I'd been in love with someone who was already making other plans. "You don't have to do this the hard way," Eleanor said. "He's frightened enough that he'll listen." "I know," I said. I knocked on the door. Silence. Then, "Who is it?" The voice of someone who had been awake since before 6 and had spent the last 2 hours watching everything they'd built collide with a Thursday morning newspaper. "Someone who needs you to listen to me very carefully for about 3 minutes, I said. "Who are you?" "Open the door, Kyle." A long pause, then the sound of locks disengaging. Then the door opened. He looked worse than I'd expected. Unshaven. The careful professional composure completely absent. He looked like a man who had been calculating escape routes and finding all of them blocked. He looked at me, and his face did something complicated and multi-layered that I didn't entirely have a single word for but recognized as a specific kind of reckoning. "You're dead," he said. I was, I said. Can I come in? He stepped back without saying yes, which I interpreted as yes. I came in. The apartment was the larger one Dana had described. Nice furniture, the kind of space that communicated arrival. A laptop open on the kitchen counter with Soul's piece on the screen. I sat down across from him without being invited. He remained standing, looking at me with the expression of someone whose model of reality had just developed a significant structural problem. How? He said. Later, I said. Right now, there are 2 people in a car on your street who were placed there by Aldrich Voss approximately 40 minutes ago. They are waiting for authorization to come up here. You have somewhere between 15 and 20 minutes before that authorization comes through and the people in that car receive instructions to act on it. He went pale. The specific pale of someone who had understood something they had been trying not to understand. He's cleaning up, Cale said. Yes, because of the peace. Because of the peace, and because you're about to become a liability with too much information and a strong incentive to cooperate with investigators in exchange for consideration. Kyle sat down heavily in the chair across from me. He looked at the laptop, at the piece on the screen, at the carefully documented trail that led directly to him and nowhere near the man who had built it. He set me up, he said. Yes, I said. He's been building the documentation for 3 weeks. It's very thorough. You'll notice your name appears in places you don't actually remember signing anything. He was quiet. I watched him work through it, the architecture of what had been done to him and what it meant. Why are you telling me this? He said finally. Because I need you to do something specific in the next 10 minutes, and then I need you to get out of this building before the people downstairs receive their instructions. What do you need me to do? Call your lawyer, I said. Right now. Tell him you're prepared to cooperate with the investigation that Soul's piece is about to trigger. Tell him you have information about Aldrich Voss that goes beyond what's in the piece. Tell him you need immediate protective custody and a formal agreement before you say anything further to anyone. Cale looked at me. You're trying to make sure Voss goes down, he said. I'm trying to make sure you go down for what you actually did, I said. Not for what Voss arranged. There's a real and important difference between those 2 things, and it matters to me that the difference is preserved in whatever happens next. He held my gaze for a long moment. Something moved in his expression, something complicated and not entirely comfortable to look at. You died, he said quietly. I came back, I said, with some assistance. He looked at the room as if he could see the 10 people in it. He couldn't, but something in the quality of the space seemed to register. I pushed you off a building, he said. Yes, I said, I know. Doesn't that make you want to? Yes, I said. It does. I'm choosing not to act on it. Make the call, Cale. You've got maybe 8 minutes now. He made the call. I sat across from him and listened to every word of it. He spoke in careful, controlled sentences to his lawyer, choosing each one deliberately. He was prepared to cooperate fully with any investigation arising from the Voss Meridian reporting. He had information extending beyond what had been published. He required immediate protective custody arrangements before he said anything further to anyone. His lawyer heard all of it and asked 3 sharp questions. His lawyer, to his credit, had clearly also been awake since 6. He understood the situation immediately. He asked 3 clarifying questions and then said he'd have someone at the building in 15 minutes. Get your phone and your passport and nothing else, I said when Cale hung up. Don't use the elevator. There are stairs at the north end of the corridor that come out on the side street. Your lawyer's people will meet you at the coffee shop on the corner of Aldner Street in 15 minutes. Don't take the elevator. Use the north stairs. Cale stood, looked at me, opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. I don't understand why you're doing this, he said. I'm doing it because it's what needs to happen, I said. Not because you deserve it from me. He nodded once, picked up his phone and his passport, walked to the door, stopped, didn't turn around. I'm sorry, he said. I know, I said. Go. He went. I stayed in the apartment for a moment after the door closed. The room was quiet. Expensive furniture. A life that had been going well up until today. The laptop with Saul's piece still on the screen. That was the right thing to do, Eleanor said, with the certainty she brought to all her assessments. It was the necessary thing, Ray said. There was a meaningful difference between those 2 framings, and I appreciated that both of them offered their version. I left the apartment the way I'd entered, down the service stairs, out the side entrance, back onto the street. The car was still there, still waiting. As I walked past it, going the other direction, my phone buzzed. A message from Dana. Setha. Harlan Sethi. He's the thread. Appears in all 3 as a regulatory contact. 3 months before each investigation stalled. Checking financial connections. Now, give me an hour. I kept walking, around the corner, 2 blocks north. Marin fell into step beside me from wherever she'd been while I was inside. He's going to cooperate, I said. I know, she said. I could feel the shift when the call was made. What does a shift feel like to you? She considered this. Like a weight redistributing, she said. Like something that was going to happen in one way beginning to happen in a different way. Is that common? Less than it should be, she said. We walked for a while without talking. The city was fully awake now. The piece had been live for 2 hours, and the financial news networks were starting to pick it up. I could see it on screens in the coffee shops we passed. Voss Meridian investigation. Senior official seeks protective custody. That was fast. Cale's lawyer had moved fast. I approved. The structure, I said. They've seen the piece. They know Cale is cooperating. What's their next move? They don't move against Cale directly now, Marin said. Too visible. Too much scrutiny. They'll let the legal process run and focus on ensuring their deeper assets remain protected. Seth, I said. He's exposed if Dana can document the financial connections. Yes, she said. Which means they'll move to protect him or distance him, depending on how exposed he becomes in the next 24 hours. She looked at me. You need to get Dana's information to Saul before they have time to move Seth. I know, I said. We were back at my building. I took the stairs 2 at a time and sat down at the laptop and opened the anonymous channel Jin maintained. I drafted a message to Saul's encrypted inbox. Brief, just a name and a description of what to look for. Harlan Seth, Deputy Director level, Financial Regulatory Oversight. Check his appearance and the documentation surrounding the 3 previous investigations. Look at the Foundation donation trail. Jin routed it. 3 minutes. Clean. Done, he said. I sat back and looked at the ceiling and thought about what came next. The piece was running across every major platform. Cale was cooperating. Seth's name was now securely in Saul's hands, and she knew what to do with it. Voss was somewhere out of the city with carefully prepared contingencies, and a strong incentive to stay far away from anything that connected back to him. The local infrastructure of the structure in the city was in the active process of collapsing in ways that would take months to fully understand and assess, which meant the structure itself would be looking at what had happened here and assessing. Not immediately. These things moved slowly at the deeper levels, but eventually. Marin, I said, when they assess, what do they see? She thought about it. They see a journalist who did exceptional work, she said. They see a former employee who cooperated with investigators. They see a regulatory official whose financial connections to Voss are about to become very public in a way that cannot be easily managed or suppressed. They don't see me, I said. Not yet, she said. You have remained entirely invisible in this, which was the point. How long does invisible last? She looked at me steadily. Until you do something that requires them to look more carefully, she said. Which will happen. It always happens. The question is what you are when it does. I nodded. The system sent a quiet pulse. Not a mission notification exactly, more like a confirmation, like something checking in, like Elias noting that the work had progressed. I put my hand on the table, not for any particular reason that I could explain clearly, just to feel the solidity of the surface, to confirm that solid things still existed and I was among them. Eleanor said, "You should eat something. You haven't eaten since yesterday evening." "Later," I said. "Now," Eleanor said, in the tone that brooked no argument from either the living or the dead. I ate something. It was fine. Marcus approved of the construction of the sandwich in the way he approved of well-built things, which was to say, quietly and sincerely. The next several hours moved in the way that hours move when something large is happening that you can observe but not control. Soul's piece spread through every major platform. The financial crimes desk at 3 other publications began following the thread she'd established. The Regulatory Commission announced it was reviewing the Voss Meridian file. An Attorney General's office, 3 states over, issued a brief statement referencing ongoing investigations into entities connected to the Voss Meridian reporting. At 2 in the afternoon, a name that hadn't been in Sewell's original piece appeared in a follow-up story she published. Deputy Director Harlan Seth placed on administrative leave pending review of regulatory conduct. That was faster than I'd expected. She already had some of it, Jin said, reading the pattern. Our message gave her the confirmation she needed to run what she already suspected. She's very good, Lily said again, with the specific tone of genuine professional respect that she reserved for people who did careful work under pressure and did it well. At 4 in the afternoon, Dana called. Seth's financial connections are documented across all 3 investigations, she said. I'm sending everything to Saul. She'll have it within the hour. Good, I said. Dana. A pause. You did good work on this, I said. Thorough and careful and good. A silence. Who are you, really? She asked. Someone who needed this to happen and had the resources to put the right people in the right positions, I said. Are you going to tell me more than that? No, I said. But you should know that what you've been part of here matters considerably. beyond this specific situation and beyond the people immediately visible in it. Another silence. The shape of this investigation, she said slowly. It's bigger than Voss. Yes, I said. I know, she said. She hung up without asking anything else. Dana Novak was very good at knowing when she had reached the edge of what was useful to know and smart enough to stop asking questions at exactly that point. At 6 p.m, Maren came inside without being invited for the first time. She sat down at the kitchen table and looked at the city through the window. I made coffee, set a cup in front of her. She looked at it, then at me. Then she picked it up and held it in both hands without drinking, which I had learned was how she processed warmth she wasn't entirely sure what to do with. You did well today? She said. We did well today, I said. She considered this distinction. Yes, she said. We did. Something in that, we landed differently in the room than any of the previous conversations had landed. Like it had weight that the earlier ones hadn't fully had yet. The structure, I said. They'll look eventually. Yes, she said. And when they do? She looked at me. Not the calculating assessment. The other thing. The thing that had been appearing more frequently in her expression since the morning in the park. When they do, she said carefully, they will find something they did not expect and cannot easily categorize. What will they find? Someone who can see what they do not think can be seen, she said. Someone who has built something they do not think can be built. Someone who has an ally they do not think can be allied. She set down the coffee carefully on the table. Someone who has been getting steadily stronger while they were occupied looking at other things entirely. I looked at her, at the dark coat and the dark eyes, and the quality of being ancient that she carried so naturally that you could almost forget it was there. What are you, Maren? I asked. Not in the confrontational way I might have asked it 6 weeks ago. In the way you ask someone you've been working alongside when you've gotten to the point where the question feels like it can actually land. She was quiet for a long time, longer than her usual pauses. The pause of someone deciding whether to cross a line they've been standing at for a while. I was something else before I was this, she said finally. What's something else? Something that understood both sides of the line between what is and what is not, she said. I crossed to this side and became what I am. The why of it is, she stopped. The why of it is connected to what Elias was trying to tell you when he was arguing with you 60 years ago, I said. She looked at me sharply. I'd surprised her. It didn't happen often. Yes, she said. It is. You were removed, I said quietly. Like Elias. Another long pause. Not removed, she said. Changed. There is a difference, though the mechanism was similar, the same hands. The structure, I said. Something older than what you currently call the structure, she said. Something that predates it. The structure is a more recent expression of something with deeper roots. Yes. We sat with that in the small kitchen on a Thursday evening while the city processed the day's news outside the window. 10 souls quiet in the background, the coffee going cold between her hands. Is that why you agreed to help me? I asked. Because what happened to you and what happened to Elias and what happened to me are all connected at the same source. She held my gaze for a long moment. Partly, she said, which was the most honest thing I'd ever heard her say about herself. And that made it the most significant thing she'd ever said in my presence, which was saying something given the competition. Okay, I said, then we're doing this together. We appear to be, she said. You almost smile again. More than almost this time, just briefly, just enough. The system sent a new prompt, not a mission notification, something different. The texture of Elias's messages, direct, personal, coming through the 60-year framework. You have done in weeks what I could not do in years. The next stage requires understanding what I discovered before they reached me. There is information embedded in the framework itself. I read the message through twice, and then looked at Maren across the kitchen table. Did you know about this? I suspected, she said. I didn't know. 60 years ago when I collected him, I felt something pass into the framework that was more than just a soul leaving a trace. I didn't understand it at the time. And now? Now I understand that he embedded not just himself, but everything he had discovered. Everything he learned about the structure before they caught him. All of it is embedded in the architecture, preserved carefully, waiting for exactly the moment when someone is positioned to actually use it. I sat back in my chair. All 10 souls quietly processing this new information in their various ways. The knowledge that Elias had left behind, not just a framework and a system and a method, but a body of intelligence about the very thing we were working against. 60 years of careful work, preserved in the architecture, waiting for the moment when someone was ready to receive it. When I'm ready, I said. How will I know? Maren looked at me. You'll know, she said. You've been getting ready since you woke up on the floor of your apartment and said round 2 to nobody? Was that round 2? I said. That was round 1, Marcus said, from somewhere warm and certain inside me. What we just did today was round 2. What comes next? Jin asked, with the particular energy of someone who was already thinking at least 3 steps ahead and finding the view from there both exciting and alarming. I looked at Marin. She looked back. For a moment, the apartment was very quiet and very specific, and the weight of everything that had happened in the last 6 weeks was present in it without being heavy. Surprising that. I had genuinely expected the accumulated weight of everything to feel considerably heavier by now. It didn't. That was telling. What comes next, I said, is that we figure out what Elias knew, and then we figure out what to do with it. And the structure? Dion asked, when they finally look at us directly. Then we're ready for them, Ray said with the uncomplicated certainty of someone who had spent his whole life preparing for things that were bigger than expected, and had found that preparation was always worth the effort. Eleanor said, then we are exactly what Elias designed us to be. What did he design? Lily asked. A problem they can't solve by removing it, Eleanor said, because the solution is already in the architecture, already distributed, already past the point where removing any one piece changes the outcome. She paused. That's what he figured out, and why they moved against him before he could finish. He didn't get to finish, I said. No, Eleanor said, but you might. Outside, the city kept going. The peace was spreading. The investigation was deepening. Kale was in protective custody and cooperating with people who would make sure his cooperation actually meant something for the case. Voss was somewhere out of the city with his contingencies intact, not yet fully understanding that the contingencies themselves had already been anticipated and accounted for. Seth was on administrative leave and getting closer to the end of the protection the structure had been providing him for 14 years. And somewhere in the architecture of a 60-year-old system built by a man who had argued with death in a waiting room, information was sitting and waiting for the moment when it could be useful. Marin stood, moved toward the window, stopped. Tomorrow, she said. We begin on the framework. Tomorrow, I agreed. She stepped through the window onto the fire escape. But before she did, she turned and looked at me with those dark eyes that had been collecting no light for longer than this city had existed. Asher Vane, she said. Yes. You were worth it. She turned and was gone into the city. I sat in the kitchen for a long time after that, not thinking about anything in particular, just sitting with the weight of the day and the weight of the 6 weeks before it, and the weight of whatever came next. 10 people quiet around me, each of them doing what they did. Marcus, steady and warm, Eleanor monitoring, Ray alert, Jin already planning, Lily already analyzing, Dion already mapping what came next, the professor already thinking about historical precedent, Theo already thinking about what needed to be nourished, Pete already thinking about what needed to be built, and somewhere in the architecture of something old and carefully constructed, Elias, still waiting, still patient, 60 years and counting, and now finally, a reason to stop waiting. I put my hand on the table. I looked at the window where Marin had been standing. The fire escape was empty. The city was below. The night was continuing without comment. Round 3, I said to the quiet room. To all of them. To the city outside, that didn't know it was being protected by a dead man and his dead friends and a reaper who had just remembered what it felt like to choose. Round 3, Marcus said, with the quiet certainty of someone who had built things his whole life and knew what it felt like when the foundation was solid. Let's build something, I said, and we did. If this story hit different for you, tell me in the comments which moment landed hardest. And if you're not subscribed yet, the bell is right there. We're just getting started. The next morning, I sat at the kitchen table with the framework open in my mind for the first time. Not accessing it, just feeling the edges of it, the shape of 60 years of careful, invisible work preserved in something that was part system and part soul and part something I still didn't have the right word for. It felt like standing in front of a library that had been built in the dark by someone who knew exactly what they were putting in every room and why. Organized, intentional, patient in the way that only someone who knew they weren't going to be around to use it themselves could be patient. How do we access it? I asked Marin. She was at the kitchen table across from me. She had started arriving indoors now without needing to be invited, which I took as a significant development. Carefully, she said. And not all at once, she said. Elias built it to be received gradually. He understood patience better than most. How much at once? Whatever you can hold without it changing you faster than you can adapt to the change, she said. Elias spent years building the framework. He did not intend for it to be received in an afternoon. How long? Months, she said. Possibly longer, depending on what's in there and how it was structured. She looked at me. He was very thorough. That was always his quality. Thoroughness beyond what most people would sustain. I thought about Elias in the park, the trace of him on the bench, the careful way he held what he was about to lose. A thorough man, a patient man, a man who had built a 60-year message in a bottle and trusted the current to carry it to the right shore. That was where we were. Okay, I said. We do it carefully. We do it over time. We don't rush it. Agreed, Marin said. She picked up the coffee cup, held it in both hands, the way she had the night before, the way she was starting to do consistently, as if warmth was something she was in the process of remembering how to receive. Marcus said, from somewhere warm and practical inside me, what do we need to do today specifically? Today, I said, we let everything that happened yesterday continue without interference. The investigation runs. Dana monitors. Saul follows the thread. We stay invisible and let the machinery that's already moving continue to move. Ray, and if Voss's people make a move that requires a response? Then we respond, I said, but we don't invite it. Eleanor's rule. Eleanor's rule, Ray repeated without argument, which still surprised me every time it happened. Some things you didn't fully get used to. Jin was already monitoring 6 different news feeds simultaneously through the ambient awareness that Seoul residents provided. Seth's administrative leave was deepening into a formal investigation. 3 separate financial journalists were following Seoul's thread. Kale's protective custody had been confirmed through an attorney general's office. Lily was cross-referencing everything Jin fed her with the connections we'd mapped over the previous weeks, building the picture from the bottom up the way she would have built a biochemical model. Systematic, patient. Finding the structures underneath the visible structures the way she had always found things, which was methodically and without rushing. Dion was mapping the network of physical locations connected to Voss's satellite operations, the ones Dana had found, laying the geography of it over everything else we knew. The professor was already thinking about how this connected to patterns he recognized from the historical record, seeing it in context that predated all of us. This was what Elias had built, not just the system, not just the ability, the capacity for this. For 10 people and a Reaper working together on a problem that was bigger than any of them individually, working in the parallel way that the framework made possible, and that Elias had specifically designed it to enable. He was lonely, Eleanor had said last night. And looking at what he'd built and understanding that he'd built it alone, I understood that in a way I hadn't quite before. He had constructed the possibility of exactly this, and then had to leave before he could be part of it. That was where we were. Elias, I said quietly, not out loud, just internally toward the framework, toward whatever remained that could receive it. We're taking care of it. The quiet pulse again. Not a response exactly, more like an acknowledgement, like something that had been waiting to be told that could finally rest. That was where we were. The morning moved forward. The investigation deepened. The city went about its business in the continuous way that cities did, indifferent to the specific architecture of consequence that was unfolding inside it, on this Thursday in the life of someone it didn't know was there. And in a rented room under a name that wasn't his own, a dead man who had come back with better company than he'd left with sat at a kitchen table, planning the next stage of something that had been 60 years in the making and was only now, finally, beginning to move at the speed it had always been meant to move. Round 3, I thought again. Not the last time. There would be more rounds. There would be more moments where the structure looked at us directly and we had to be ready to meet that look. There would be more things that required the specific combination of everything we'd built and everything we were still building. But we had today. We had the morning. We had 10 souls and a Reaper who had just remembered how to choose, and a framework full of 60 years of intelligence that was waiting to be received carefully over time. We had, in the most fundamental sense, exactly what we needed to keep going. And keeping going was the whole point. That was what Elias had understood that they hadn't. You didn't have to win. You just had to be impossible to finish. So, Marcus said, what are we building next? I looked at Marin. She looked back at me. The dark eyes. The almost smile that was becoming more than almost. The quality of being present that was different now from what it had been 6 weeks ago on a fire escape outside my window. Everything, I said. That was all that needed to be said. We turned toward what needed building and we got to work, and the work felt exactly like what it was.